Tonight we stand in the winter of 1946 beside a pale mound rising from southern Iraq. The place is called Abu Shahrain, although inscriptions identify it as ancient Eridu. Iraqi archaeologist Fuad Safar arrives with Seton Lloyd and a team from the Directorate of Antiquities. Their trenches will expose buildings resting upon older buildings, each one pressed deeper into prehistoric silence. The official excavation records, later preserved by the institutions including Yale University, describe a settlement whose beginnings reach toward the 6th millennium before the Common Era. Yet beneath the measurements and careful drawings waits a strange possibility. Mesopotamian tradition remembers Eridu as the place where kingship first entered the human world, somewhere beneath this dust. A ruler supposedly served beneath the authority of Enki. Archaeology finds his city, it does not find him. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You may also share your location and local time below. It is comforting to imagine distant listeners entering this ancient landscape together. The evening air settles softly over the mound, carrying dry earth against your skin. Nothing here resembles the green country described in ancient religious memory. The horizon lies flat and almost empty, disturbed only by broken walls and scattered pottery. Wind moves through the excavation trenches with a faint scraping sound underfoot. Fragments of painted vessels emerge from the soil like pieces of cooled sunset. Eridu does not greet you with standing columns or carved royal faces. There are no towering gateways announcing the achievements of a victorious monarch. Instead, the city introduces itself through mud brick, ash, pottery, and patient layers of occupation. Its earliest inhabitants leave ordinary traces, which is rather inconsiderate of them. They apparently never anticipated modern viewers demanding an immediate answer. The excavators work slowly because mud brick ruins can disappear beneath careless hands. A wall may resemble untouched soil until its edges become visible through texture and colour. Floors reveal themselves through packed clay, burned patches, scattered bones, and slight changes in elevation. Every basket of earth must be examined before it is carried away. One hurried movement could erase a doorway used thousands of years ago. The dust seems to remember. As the trench deepens, time becomes physical. You can place your hand near a surface where someone once stood beneath an unfamiliar sky. That person may have carried fish, grain, reeds, or a vessel filled with water. Their footsteps have vanished, yet the floor remains. Above it rests another floor, then another, formed as generations rebuilt upon inherited ground. This repeated rebuilding becomes Eridu's first great archaeological statement. The settlement does not appear as a single magnificent creation. It grows through persistence. Walls collapse, rooms are cleared, foundations are renewed, and sacred space gathers weight. The city rises because people continually return to the same place. Memory becomes architecture, one mud brick at a time. Records confirm that Eridu belonged to the earliest settled traditions of southern Mesopotamia. Archaeological research published through major universities places its formative occupation within the long development associated with early farming and marsh communities. These people lived before written royal chronicles could preserve their names. They shaped clay, managed food, built durable structures, and organized shared ceremonies. They also inhabited a world where survival depended upon cooperation. Water channels required attention. Animals moved through seasonal wetlands, and harvests could fail without warning. Authority may have grown from practical responsibilities rather than jeweled thrones. Someone coordinated labor. Someone guarded stored food. Someone spoke for the community when decisions carried danger. Was that person already considered a king? Scholars remain divided over how early leadership should be described. Some interpretations imagine councils, households, and ritual specialists sharing authority. Others suggest that powerful individuals could have directed labour before recognisable royal institutions appeared. The archaeological evidence remains stubbornly quiet because walls record activity more easily than titles. A large room may indicate communal gathering, religious ceremony, food distribution, or several purposes combined. A raised platform may support offerings, respected elders, stored goods, or something entirely unexpected. Modern categories become unreliable within prehistoric spaces. The earliest residents did not label their buildings for future archaeologists. Again, their lack of cooperation is impressive. You look across the exposed surfaces and notice how little separates certainty from interpretation. The shape of a room can be measured exactly, its meaning cannot. Pottery may be dated through comparison, while the intention behind its placement remains uncertain. Ash proves burning occurred, but not whether the fire served cooking, warmth, destruction, or ritual. This is where Eridu begins to divide into two cities. One city belongs to archaeology, built from material remains and cautious reconstruction. The other belongs to ancient memory, where divine power chooses locations and kingship descends according to sacred order. Both cities occupy the same mound, they simply speak in different voices. The archaeological Barkle city tells you that people settled, rebuilt, worshipped, ate, buried possessions, and endured changing conditions. The remembered city tells you that civilization began through an arrangement between humanity and powers beneath the world. Between those accounts stands the missing ruler, present within tradition but absent from every excavated inscription. No voice answers your question. One peculiar discovery deepens the atmosphere without solving anything. During earlier work at Eridu, archaeologist Henry Hall recovered a small piece of blue manufactured glass. Later researchers considered it among the earliest known examples of its kind. Although it came from a much younger occupation, the object resembles a fragment of frozen sky buried inside brown earth. It has nothing to do with the first ruler, at least as far as anyone knows, yet it reveals how easily one small object can disturb expectations. Glass seems delicate, modern, and almost unnatural beside mud brick ruins. Its presence reminds you that ancient people repeatedly mastered materials in ways later observers underestimated. Perhaps the missing king survives through something equally modest. A seal might remain beneath an unexplored slope. A broken vessel could carry signs no excavator has recognized. A foundation deposit may still wait inside a wall untouched by earlier trenches. Archaeology teaches patience because absence today does not guarantee absence forever. Yet caution matters. A desired discovery can become visible inside almost any ambiguous object. Marks may resemble writing because the eye searches for names. A larger residence may become a palace because the imagination expects a ruler. Even Seder can be treated as secrecy when ordinary loss offers the simpler explanation. The first inhabitants of Eridu live beyond writing. Their world must be reconstructed through materials that never intended to tell stories. Clay floors do not exaggerate, but neither do they explain themselves. The excavator provides the grammar, the listener supplies the human presence. For a moment, you hear the soft strike of a tool against compacted earth. Workers pause and lean toward a newly exposed line of bricks. Brushes clear the surface until a corner emerges. It is not a throne room or a royal tomb. It is simply another wall, humble and carefully made. That humble wall may matter more than treasure. It proves that someone planned space, gathered labour, prepared clay, and expected the structure to endure. It reveals organised life before later scribes placed legendary kings upon Eridu's ancient horizon. The material city is already old when the written story begins. Researchers continue debating whether later Mesopotamians preserved distant historical memories or created symbolic beginnings for political reasons. Perhaps both processes occurred together. Oral traditions can carry genuine fragments while reshaping them for changing audiences. A forgotten leader may become an ideal king. A local shrine may become the birthplace of order. This possibility does not transform legend into proven biography. It simply keeps the boundary open. The first king could represent a historical person whose identity dissolved across millennia. He could embody several leaders blended into one figure. He could also be entirely literary. Ksyosko, created to explain why authority appeared sacred, the silence holds its ground. Night gathers above Abu Shahrain, and the trenches darken into narrow bands of shadow. Loose pottery glints faintly beneath the fading ski. The mound appears lifeless. Yet every layer contains choices made by people who believed their work mattered. They built upon older foundations because the location already carried meaning. You stand where evidence and memory touch without fully joining. Beneath you rests one of humanity's oldest urban experiments. Above it floats a tradition concerning divine wisdom, descending kingship, and a ruler placed near the beginning of time. The city has been found. Its first king remains hidden. Perhaps he waits beneath an unopened layer. Perhaps he survives only inside the architecture of belief. For now, Eridu offers no crown, no portrait, and no certain royal grave. It gives you dust, patient walls, and the unsettling knowledge that a place can be real while its most famous inhabitant remains unreachable. Your mind drifts across a landscape that no longer exists in its ancient form. Water glimmers where desert now stretches, and reed beds sway beneath a warm southern sky. The air smells of wet clay, fish, salt, and crushed plants beneath bare feet. Narrow channels twist through marshes, carrying fresh water toward broad, shallow lagoons. Eridu rises near this watery edge, not as an isolated monument, but as part of a living wetland. Its earliest inhabitants understand the moods of channels, seasonal floods and hidden springs. They know where fish gather, where reeds grow strongest, and where the ground becomes dangerous. Their survival depends upon reading water as carefully as later scribes read clay tablets. The city belongs to mud and water. Southern Mesopotamia appears different during the earliest phases of settlement. Studies connected with the University of Chicago and Oxford University have reconstructed shifting shorelines and wetlands across the ancient plain. Rivers repeatedly alter their courses, while sediment creates new land and buries older channels. The environment changes slowly enough to seem permanent, then suddenly enough to ruin careful plans. You stand beside a quiet inlet as morning light spreads across the reeds. Small boats move without sails, pushed by poles through shallow water. Fishermen lift woven traps while birds circle above the marsh. Children gather edible plants near the bank, and smoke rises from cooking fires behind low houses. The houses are built from materials growing almost within reach. Reeds become mats, walls, baskets, roofing, and boat frames. Clay seals gaps and strengthens surfaces against wind. Wood remains scarce, so every useful branch carries unusual value. A straight beam can become more precious than decorated pottery. This environment shapes the imagination of the people living there. Water is never merely useful. It arrives from hidden places, sustains life, destroys boundaries, and disappears without explanation. A channel may nourish fields for years, then wander elsewhere. A spring may continue flowing when the sky offers no rain. Such mysteries encourage sacred interpretations. Enki, the divine patron of Eridu, becomes associated with fresh water concealed beneath the earth. Ancient thinkers imagined a deep reservoir supporting wells, rivers, fertility, and human life. His domain is not the violent sea, but the hidden sweetness that makes settlement possible. This distinction matters. Salt water surrounds and threatens, while fresh water preserves gardens, animals, and people. The inhabitants of Eridu live close enough to both worlds to feel the difference physically. One kind of water saves, the other can poison fields. Records preserved in major museum collections show that Later Mesopotamian tradition consistently links Enki with wisdom, craftsmanship, and subterranean waters. These ideas likely developed across many generations rather than appearing fully formed. Sacred identity grows through repetition, local experience, and stories told beside familiar channels. You can almost hear those stories forming during long evenings. An elder watches dark water reflecting the stars and explains why certain springs never fail. A fisherman describes an unexpected current that guided his boat home. A mother pours clean water into a vessel and whispers gratitude toward powers beneath the ground. No single moment creates a god's character. Thousands do. The marsh also teaches people that the visible world rests upon hidden systems. Fish move beneath opaque water. Roots spread below mud, and underground moisture appears far from open channels. What cannot be seen may still determine everything. This idea becomes central to Eridu's spiritual atmosphere. A quirky tradition later claims that extraordinary sages emerged from the water to teach humanity useful arts. Some accounts describe beings connected with fish, wisdom, and the ordering of civilized life. Scholars treat these stories as mythology, not zoological reporting. Despite the enthusiasm of certain modern interpreters, the image remains strangely suitable for Eridu. Knowledge seems to rise from water because water already provides transport, food, clay, plants, and connection. Boats carry ideas between settlements as easily as they carry baskets. A useful technique learned downstream may arrive disguised as divine instruction. That is not proven. It is possible. Researchers continued debating how much the marsh environment directly influenced early religious symbolism. Some scholars emphasize local ecology, arguing that divine roles grew from practical relationships with water. Others caution that later texts may project mature theology onto much earlier communities. The distance between excavation layers and surviving literature spans many centuries. The debate remains open because prehistoric belief leaves few direct statements. A building can reveal repeated offerings and careful cleaning and controlled access. It had not explained the words spoken inside. A vessel may contain fish bones, yet the fish could represent food, tribute, ritual, or waste. Even silence becomes evidence only with care. As midday heat thickens, insects hum above the shallows. Reed leaves brush together with a dry, papery sound. Mud squeezes between your toes, warm near the surface and cool below. Every sensation reminds you that settlement here requires constant adjustment. The people cut channels, reinforce banks, and raise floors above damp ground. They repair walls damaged by moisture and replace mats worn by use. Their world is not primitive simplicity. It is a demanding system of observation, labour, and cooperation. A failed embankment can flood storage rooms. A blocked channel can starve a garden. Too little water brings hunger, while too much water destroys houses. Authority may grow around those who understand this balance and organise collective work. This creates another question about the first ruler associated with Eridu. Could early leadership have begun with water management rather than warfare? A person who directs channels, settles disputes, and protects sacred springs already holds unusual power. Such authority may later be remembered as kingship, even if no crown exists. Yale scholars studying early Mesopotamian society have often stressed the gradual formation of institutions. Temples, households, labour groups, and local leaders develop through overlapping responsibilities. Political authority does not necessarily arrive as a sudden invention. It may gather slowly around those who control essential resources. Water is the most essential resource imaginable. You follow a narrow path raised above the marsh. On one side, pale fish flash beneath green water. On the other, cultivated plots stretch toward low mud brick buildings. The boundary between wild wetland and human order remains thin, renewed daily through maintenance. Eridu's sacred importance may arise from this fragile boundary. The city stands where hidden fresh water meets the dangerous openness of marsh and sea. It becomes a place where disorder can be negotiated rather than defeated. Enki's wisdom reflects careful management, not brute strength. There is gentle irony in this divine arrangement. Later kings boast about conquest, walls, and armies. Eridu's oldest sacred power seems more interested in canals, craft knowledge, and keeping people alive. Civilization begins not with thunder, but with someone noticing where the water should flow. The thought settles quietly. Evening cools the reeds, and the scent of damp earth grows stronger. Boats return with baskets of fish, while smoke gathers beneath a darkening sky. Frogs begin calling from the shallows, creating a rhythm older than any written hymn. You sense how easily this landscape could become sacred. Every household depends upon forces moving below sight. Every meal reflects knowledge of seasons, channels, and living water. The city's identity grows from this patient intimacy with a difficult environment. Eridu does not merely stand beside water, it understands itself through water. Its god dwells in hidden freshness. Its people build with marsh plants, and its authority may emerge from controlling flow. The first king, whether historical or symbolic, belongs to this wet world. His power would not begin in a stone palace. It would begin beside a channel, where water entered dry ground and life followed. In your ears, the ripple of water changes into a deeper sound beneath the earth. It seems to move below the temple platform, hidden under packed clay and brick. The people of Eridu cannot see this unseen current, yet they imagine it supporting every spring, canal, and fertile field. At the centre of that belief stands Enki, the divine lord of fresh water and wisdom. His presence does not arrive through thunder or blazing sunlight. It rises quietly from wells, underground channels, and the cool darkness below ordinary life. The oldest sanctuary at Eridu develops around this intimate idea. Worshippers approach a building shaped by repeated care, not overwhelming walls. Its platform lifts sacred space above the surrounding settlement. Inside, carefully arranged rooms guide movement toward a place reserved for offerings and divine attention. Clay walls hold the day's heat. Shadows gather in the narrow corners, where oil lamps release the scent of smoke and animal fat. Sandals scrape across plastered floors while attendants carry bowls containing grain, fish, dates, or scented liquid. Each offering gives physical form to an invisible relationship. People provide food and attention, while the god provides order, water, and knowledge. The arrangement resembles hospitality, obligation, and dependence woven into a single ritual act. Scholars at Oxford University have examined how Mesopotamian temples functioned as both sacred and economic institutions. Their research describes places where offerings, labour, storage, and authority became closely connected. Eridu's sanctuary may therefore represent more than private devotion. It may also preserve an early structure of organised society. Temple attendants manage goods, maintain buildings, and coordinate ceremonies. Such responsibilities create lasting offices, remembered duties, and a hierarchy shaped around divine service. Enki's sanctuary later becomes known as the House of the Water Deep. The title evokes a building resting above the hidden freshwater realm beneath the world. Ancient Mesopotamians imagined this subterranean domain as a source of life, wisdom, and creative power. You step inward through a doorway and feel the temperature change. The room is cooler than the sunlit courtyard, and the air carries damp clay. A vessel stands near a wall, perhaps filled for purification, offerings, or ordinary use. The distinction may not have mattered as sharply as modern minds prefer. In a sacred household, practical actions can become religious through repetition. Pouring water, cleaning a floor, or preparing food may all serve divine order. Enki is also associated with craftsmanship and intelligent planning. He understands how things fit together, from irrigation channels to social duties. His wisdom is not just distant philosophy. It is the practical knowledge that allows communities to function. This makes him especially suitable for Eridu. A city surrounded by unstable water requires calculation, patience, and careful maintenance. Survival depends upon noticing small changes before they become disasters. The god's character mirrors these demands. He is clever rather than impulsive, persuasive rather than openly violent. Ancient stories sometimes present him solving problems through unexpected plans, quiet negotiations, or useful gifts. One curious tradition describes Enki as keeping divine powers that govern civilization. These powers include crafts, offices, rituals, music, truth, falsehood, and even the habits of taverns. The list is surprisingly broad, suggesting that sacred order includes human confusion as well as dignity. Apparently, civilization requires both wisdom and questionable evening decisions. The detail sounds humorous, yet it reveals an important pattern. Mesopotamian thought does not separate sacred life from ordinary behavior. Farming, weaving, judgment, sexuality, music, grief, and celebration all belong within the structure of existence. Enki's authority therefore reaches beyond water. He becomes guardian of the knowledge required to build a human world. In this vision, civilization is not invented accidentally. It is arranged, distributed, and maintained through divine intelligence. Researchers at Yale University have explored how ancient Mesopotamian myths describe creation as organization rather than creation from nothing. Land, water, labor, names, and duties are placed into meaningful relationships. Order emerges when each force receives a role. The temple at Eridu embodies that principle in architecture. Space is divided, movement is directed, and offerings follow expected patterns. Every room participates in a structure greater than itself. Yet archaeologists cannot simply identify Enki inside the earliest layers. No surviving inscription from those deepest levels announces his name. The connection comes from later texts, later traditions, and the long sacred reputation of Eridu. This creates a serious scholarly debate. Some historians believe the sanctuary's association with Enki may preserve a very ancient local cult. Others argue that later theology could have reshaped the meaning of earlier buildings. The evidence allows confidence, but not certainty. Repeated rebuilding proves that the location remained important across generations. It does not reveal exactly how the earliest worshippers understood the power they served. Perhaps they imagined a soaring spirit, an ancestral protector, or a nameless force beneath the ground. Enki's familiar identity may have formed gradually as stories, rituals, and institutions developed. You can picture generations adding details to an inherited presence. One community remembers the power as guardian of wells, another praises its skill in crafts. Priests connect those qualities with wisdom, fertility, and creation. Eventually, the god acquires a complete personality. He receives family relationships, sacred titles, symbols, and stories. The temple becomes his household, and the city becomes inseparable from his authority. This development does not make the belief less real to its worshippers. A tradition can change while retaining a powerful sense of continuity. Each generation inherits something ancient, then quietly reshapes it through present needs. The rough surface of a temple wall carries this process visibly. New bricks rest upon older foundations, while the sacred location remains constant. Theology may develop in the same manner, with new meanings built upon inherited ground. The first ruler associated with Eridu enters this system of sacred authority. He does not stand entirely apart from the song. His legitimacy depends upon serving the order represented by Enki. A king in such a setting may function as caretaker, mediator, and organizer. He ensures offerings arrive, canals remain useful, and human labor supports divine expectations. Political authority becomes meaningful because it appears connected to cosmic structure. This relationship may explain why the ruler's identity is difficult to separate from religious tradition. His role is preserved not through personal biography, but through his position within a sacred pattern. The king rules because kingship has descended into Enki's city. The phrase suggests authority coming from outside humanity. People do not simply choose a leader through convenience. Rule receives divine weight, making obedience part of the world's proper arrangement. It is possible that this idea emerged long after the earlier settlement. Later rulers may have projected their institutions into deep antiquity. By placing kingship at Eridu, they link political power with the oldest sacred centre imaginable. Still, the choice of Eridu is revealing. Another city could have been selected, perhaps one with greater military fame or richer royal monuments. Tradition instead points toward a place associated with water, wisdom, and creation. That choice gives the first king a particular character. He is not remembered as the conqueror of distant lands. He appears as the earliest human participant in a divinely ordered system. Outside the sanctuary, night settles over reeds and low rooftops. Inside, a lamp flickers against clay plaster. Water rests silently within a vessel, reflecting a small circle of light. The temple seems to float above unseen depths. Beneath its floor lies ordinary earth, yet belief transforms that darkness into a reservoir of life. Every spring becomes a message from below. Enki remains hidden, but his influence shapes the city's imagination. Wisdom flows like groundwater, invisible until it reaches the surface. Authority follows the same pattern, rising through ritual, labour, and memory. The first king stands somewhere within that quiet ascent. His name belongs to tradition, while his power belongs to the temple's deeper logic. He rules not merely over people, but beneath the gaze of the god who understands hidden things. A stylus presses into damp clay, leaving small wedge-shaped marks beneath a steady hand. The room smells of dust, lamp smoke, and wet earth prepared for writing. Outside, city life continues with carts, voices, animals, and the distant movement of river water. The scribe works within a world already ancient to him. Temples have risen and fallen, dynasties have vanished, and forgotten rulers have become shadows. His task is not merely recording names. He is arranging the whole history of kingship into a meaningful pattern. At the beginning of that pattern stands Eridu. The surviving composition is commonly called the Sumerian King List. Several copies and fragments preserve different versions, created by scribes during the early second millennium before the Common Era. One famous copy, now held by the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford University, was written upon a tall clay prism. Its opening statement is calm, brief, and immense in implication. Kingship descends from heaven, and Eridu becomes its first earthly home. The text does not describe an election, a rebellion, or a successful conquest. Authority arrives as something transferred from the divine realm. This is a remarkable claim. You watch the imagined scribe pause before continuing. He has reduced the origin of government to a single sacred movement. Kingship exists above humanity, complete and waiting, until the gods place it within one chosen city. The idea changes how rule is understood. A ruler is not powerful simply because he commands workers or defeats enemies. He occupies an office believed to possess divine approval. The institution appears older and greater than any person holding it. Kings may die, yet kingship survives. The distinction gives Mesopotamian political thought unusual depth. Individual rulers remain temporary. While the sacred office moves through time, it can leave one city and settle within another, carrying legitimacy like an invisible treasure. The King List follows this movement across a sequence of cities. Each receives authority, produces rulers, and eventually loses its privileged position. History becomes a procession of sacred custody rather than a collection of unrelated reigns. Eridu stands at the head of that procession. Its placement suggests more than local pride. The city represents primordial order, the earliest point where divine intention touches organized human society. The location is appropriate within Mesopotamian religious imagination. Enki governs wisdom, planning, useful knowledge, and the structures supporting civilized life. A city under his protection becomes a convincing birthplace for political order. Yet the text does not explain the ceremony of descent. No staircase appears between heaven and earth. No divine messenger carries a crown into the city. Kingship simply arrives, as though its movement requires no further explanation. That silence invites your imagination to linger. Perhaps the descent was pictured as a god presenting royal symbols inside a sanctuary. Perhaps it was understood as an invisible decision announced through ritual. The surviving words offer no scene, only the warranty that authority changes location. Researchers connected with Oxford University have shown that King List served political and educational purposes within scribal culture. They organised rulers into sequences, preserved traditional names, and taught students how the past could support present authority. The composition does not resemble a modern historical record. It combines rulers who appear within other evidence with figures belonging to legendary time. Reign lengths expand beyond ordinary human possibility, especially near the beginning. Accuracy is not its only ambition. The list constructs a world where political power follows a divinely guided path. Cities may fight simultaneously in material history, yet the composition often presents kingship as a single office held by one centre at a time. Disorder becomes a neat succession. Reality was probably much less cooperative. Southern Mesopotamia contained several competing cities, each with local rulers, temples, and ambitions. Their territories overlapped, alliances changed, and military struggles disturbed any tidy sequence. The King List smooths this complexity into order, behaves almost like a careful host hiding household chaos before honoured guests arrive. Rival dynasties become stages within one grand design. A quirky feature of the Ashmolean prism strengthens its mysterious appearance. The object has 4 inscribed faces and a hole running through its centre. It may once have been mounted so readers could rotate it while following the columns. You can imagine the clay turning slowly beneath lamplight. Names appear, pass from sight, and return from another side. The physical object mirrors the composition's vision of power moving through repeating cycles. The prism is much younger than the earlier settlement at Eridu. It cannot serve as contemporary evidence for the first transfer of kingship. It reveals what later Mesopotamian scribes believed, taught, or wished their audiences to accept. That difference is essential. A tradition may preserve genuine memory while also serving later political needs. Ancient writers were not passive containers. They selected, arranged, omitted, and interpreted material. Scholars continue debating how much early historical information survives within the King List. Some historians believe it contains distorted memories of real rulers and regional changes. Others view its earliest portions mainly as literary construction shaped by the theology and royal ideology. Both possibilities can exist together. A legendary framework may gather around authentic names. Political editors may preserve old traditions while changing their meaning. Oral memory can carry distant fragments through generations, although each retelling quietly reshapes them. Eridu's priority could reflect an enduring awareness of the city's exceptional age. Later communities may have encountered ancient ruins, venerable sanctuaries, and traditions claiming unmatched antiquity. Such evidence would make Eridu a natural setting for beginnings. Its first position could also serve the theology. Placing kingship within Enki's city connects government with divine wisdom, rather than human ambition. Rule appears as part of civilization's intended structure. Alongside agriculture, craftsmanship, judgment, and ritual. This interpretation gives the king a demanding role. He does not own kingship completely, he receives it temporarily, and must preserve the order attached to it. The office carries obligations toward gods, temples, labourers, fields, and cities. A ruler who fails may lose divine favour, allowing authority to move elsewhere. Political collapse can then be explained as sacred withdrawal. Such ideas offer comfort and warning. Defeat does not mean the universe has become meaningless. Kingship continues somewhere. Even when one dynasty disappears, yet every ruler knows that divine approval may not remain permanent. You feel the quiet pressure within that belief. A crown becomes less like personal property and more like borrowed fire. It illuminates the ruler, but it can also expose every failure. The King List therefore speaks to living kings as much as vanished ones. Its distant beginnings create a standard against which present authority can be measured. By tracing kingship to divine descent, scribes make obedience sacred and responsibility unavoidable. Still, the first transfer remains strangely elusive. No excavated object shows the moment when heaven supposedly chooses Eridu. No contemporary witness describes the arrival of royal authority. Only the later clay text preserves the claim, the prism turned within your thoughts, carrying columns of names through darkness. At its beginning, Eridu waits beneath the authority of Enki. Human society has settlements, rituals, and labour. Yet the text suggests something decisive has changed. Kingship now stands upon earth. A first ruler must receive it, although his identity has not yet entered your view. He waits just beyond the opening statement, where sacred chronology prepares to give authority a human name. The first royal name appears with almost no ceremony. Pressed into clay by a patient scribe, Alulim rules at Eridu, and the list grants him a reign beyond ordinary human measure. No parent is named, no conquest is described, no palace, marriage, rebellion, or burial interrupts the astonishing simplicity of his entry. You meet him as a name surrounded by silence. The sound of Alulim carries across thousands of years, although its original meaning remains uncertain. Scholars have proposed connections with words suggesting ancient authority, abundance, or a figure linked with their primordial time. None of these interpretations has settled the matter completely. His identity rests almost entirely within literary tradition. Unlike later rulers, Alulim leaves no surviving royal inscription that can be confidently assigned to him. No seal bears his portrait. No foundation tablet praises his building projects. No grave announces that the first earthly king has returned to dust, yet his position is unmistakable. He stands at the opening of human kingship. The King List assigns him 28,800 years of rule. The number is not a copying error within a single damaged tablet. Similar vast reigns appear throughout the antediluvian sequence, creating a deliberate pattern of immeasurable time. A human life cannot contain such a reign. Even the longest remembered rulers remain brief beside this figure. Alulim's years belong to a sacred scale, where chronology behaves differently from familiar history. You imagine the scribe speaking the number aloud. Each unit carries weight, expanding the king's authority beyond generations, dynasties, and ordinary memory. A reign of this size does not simply describe duration. It places Alulim near the foundation of the worlds. The number may also communicate perfection. Mesopotamian mathematics relied heavily upon a system built around 60, allowing scribes to divide quantities with remarkable flexibility. Alulim's reign fits neatly within this numerical culture, suggesting symbolic calculation rather than careless fantasy. Researchers at Yale University have studied the mathematical structure of Mesopotamian royal lists and administrative texts. Their work shows that ancient scribes treated numbers as practical tools, intellectual patterns, and carriers of meaning. A large number could express grandeur while still following precise rules. Alulim's reign therefore resembles architecture made from mathematics. Its scale lifts him above ordinary rulers, while its internal structure keeps him within a learned scribal system. The result feels impossible, yet not random. This is important because legend is often mistaken for disorder. Ancient authors could create extraordinary claims with considerable discipline. Their stories follow conventions, numerical relationships, and theological expectations understood by trained readers. Alulim appears at the beginning because beginnings require exceptional figures. Later kings inhabit a world of cities, armies, canals, and rival dynasties. The first king belongs to a cleaner and more dangerous space, where institutions have only just entered human life. He may represent kingship in its purest imagined form. There is no political opponent beside him. No competing city interrupts his authority. His reign stretches across a time when rule appears singular, sacred, and almost untouched by human failure. That image may never have reflected historical reality. Communities likely contained negotiations, disputes, households, and rival leaders from their earliest phases. Yet the King List is not interested in such confusion here. It gives you one city, one office, and one name. A fringe tradition from later Mesopotamian lore connects Alulim with the first of several sages who bring knowledge to humanity. These sages are sometimes imagined as beings associated with water, fish, and divine instruction. Certain modern writers have treated them as visitors from distant worlds, although no archaeological evidence supports that interpretation. The older tradition is more subtle. Wisdom emerges from sacred depths and reaches human society through chosen intermediaries. Alulim, as the earliest king, belongs naturally near that mysterious transfer. Perhaps he is not merely a ruler in the later political sense. He may symbolize the moment when divine knowledge receives a human guardian. Kingship, ritual, measurement, and social order become linked through one figure whose biography remains deliberately thin. This possibility explains why personal details are absent. The text may not care about Alulim as an individual man. It may care about what he represents within a sacred sequence. Still, names sometimes outlive the stories attached to them. A real local leader could have survived through oral tradition while his achievements disappeared. Generations might preserve the name, enlarge the reign, and place him at the start of royal time. Scholars continue debating whether Alulim contains a historical memory beneath the legendary framework. Some researchers consider him entirely mythological, created to complete a theological beginning. Others allow that an ancient title, ancestor, or leader may lie behind the name. The evidence cannot decide. Archaeology at Eridu confirms settlement during a period far earlier than surviving written records. That immense chronological distance leaves room for forgotten leadership, but room is not proof. A possibility becomes tempting precisely because the silence is so wide. You walk through an imagined courtyard under a pale evening sky. Workers carry baskets of grain towards a storeroom. A ritual attendant checks vessels beside a doorway, somewhere nearby. A respected figure receives reports concerning water, food, and labour. Would that person call himself king? The title may not yet exist in a recognisable form. Authority could rest upon age, ritual status, household wealth, practical knowledge, or control of communal storage. Several people might share different kinds of power without placing them beneath one crown. Later scribes could compress this complicated arrangement into a single ruler. Alulim would then become the face of a process that actually unfolded across generations. One name would stand for many unnamed organisers. That kind of compression appears throughout human memory. Cities acquire founders, laws acquire single lawgivers, and technologies acquire one inventor. Complex beginnings become easier to remember when attached to a person. Alulim may be such a person. His enormous reign also solves a narrative problem. If kingship descends at the beginning of ordered society, The first holder must seem worthy of that moment. A normal lifespan would make him appear too ordinary. 28,800 years creates distance. It tells the listener that Alulim belongs to another quality of time. He's close enough to humanity to be called king, yet remote enough to touch the sacred. For a moment, it feels as though you are standing at the edge of two chronologies. One is archaeological, measured through pottery styles, carbon samples, and building phases. The other is literary, measured through divine descent and impossible reigns. Alulim occupies the gap between them. His name is real in the simplest sense. It exists on clay tablets copied by ancient hands. His city is real. Resting beneath the mound at Abu Shahrain, the institution linked with him is real, because kingship shaped Mesopotamian society for centuries. Only the man refuses to appear. Perhaps that absence is part of his power. A ruler with a detailed biography becomes limited by events. Alulim remains unrestricted because almost nothing defines him. He can be ancestor, priest, symbol, memory, or invention. The clay gives him one line, yet that line opens an entire hidden age. You hear the scratch of the stylus, then silence returns around the name. Alulim rules in Eridu. Nothing else is certain. The number itself seems to fill the room, larger than the tablet that preserves it. 28,800 years stretch beyond dynasties, languages, and remembered generations. You do not read such a figure casually. You enter it slowly, as though stepping into a corridor whose far end cannot be seen. A reign of that length cannot describe an ordinary human life. The scribes knew this as clearly as any modern reader. They counted harvests, recorded wages, measured fields, and calculated deliveries with practical precision. Their mathematics supported temples, states, trade, and taxation across southern Mesopotamia. These were not careless people. A tablet recording grain might list exact quantities owed by several workers. Another could divide land, estimate labour, or track animals across seasons. Scribes trained for years to master signs, tables, and numerical systems. When they wrote an impossible reign, they were not accidentally losing control of arithmetic. The scale was intentional. Mesopotamian calculation developed around units related to 60. This system allowed numbers to be divided in many convenient ways, especially by 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Its influence survives quietly whenever you count 60 minutes within an hour or divide a circle into 360 degrees. That survival is rather impressive. Ancient accountants still organize your afternoon. Within such a system, enormous royal reigns could be constructed from meaningful numerical units. Alulim's reign equals 8 large periods of 3,600 years. The quantity therefore possesses mathematical order. Even while it exceeds biological possibility, the number looks fantastic, yet it behaves properly. You imagine a student seated on a woven mat, copying multiplication tables onto damp clay. His teacher watches for uneven wedges and mistaken columns. Repetition trains the hand until quantities become familiar shapes rather than abstract ideas. Large units do not frighten him. He manipulates them during exercises, just as modern students handle powers and equations. When a royal list assigns vast years to early rulers, the scribe recognizes patterns invisible to an untrained listener. Numbers can carry atmosphere. A small reign feels brief, vulnerable, and human. A vast reign creates distance and authority. It places a ruler beyond grandparents, ancestors, and the oldest names spoken within a household. The figure tells you that primordial time moved differently. It was broad, stable, and nearly motionless. One ruler could occupy thousands of generations because the world had not yet entered familiar disorder. This does not require literal belief from every ancient reader. People can understand symbolic scale without confusing it with daily experience. A hymn may call a temple eternal. even while workers repair its roof each year. Sacred language often enlarges reality. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania have studied how Mesopotamian scribes arranged numbers within literary and administrative traditions. Their work suggests that numerical choices could express hierarchy, completeness, or cosmic order. A reign might therefore communicate meaning through structure rather than biography. Alulim's years may indicate that his kingship belongs to an ideal age. The number gives his rule weight, dignity, and remoteness. It separates the first king from rulers whose reigns can be imagined within a human lifetime. The difference is not merely quantitative, it is almost geological. You feel the world changing beneath the number. Villages appear, channels shift, wetlands expand, and buildings collapse into low mounds. Thousands of years pass, yet the list allows one name to remain upon the throne. Such stillness feels unnatural within human history. Perhaps that is the point. The early age is not meant to resemble ordinary political time. It represents a world closer to divine order. Kingship remains stable because disruption has not fully entered the story. Mortality exists, yet chronology does not press upon rulers with familiar urgency. A curious tradition in later scholarship attempted to reduce these reigns by treating their units as months rather than years. This method produces shorter lives, although many results remain implausibly long. It also ignores the deliberate numerical relationships connecting the early rulers. The solution feels tidy. Ancient texts rarely reward tidiness. Other interpreters have suggested that each king represents a dynasty rather than one individual. A reign of thousands of years could compress many rulers into a single ancestral name. This idea offers a possible historical mechanism, but no contemporary evidence confirms it. The name may conceal generations, it may conceal nothing. Scholars continue debating whether the figures encode astronomical cycles, ritual calendars, mathematical symbolism, or literary grandeur. Do researchers search for relationships with planetary periods and seasonal observations? Others warn that flexible calculations can produce attractive patterns almost anywhere. That warning matters. Numbers invite imagination because they appear objective. A pattern feels convincing once lines, cycles, and divisions begin aligning across a page. Yet resemblance is not proof. The safest conclusion remains modest. The reign lengths are designed, culturally meaningful, and non-historical in the ordinary chronological sense. Their exact purpose may combine several ideas rather than one hidden formula. You look again at the imagined tablet. The wedges seem small and practical, almost humble. Nothing in their shape reveals the abyss of time contained within them. That contrast is quietly unsettling. A hand presses a few marks into clay, and entire ages appear. One line can outlast palaces, languages, and the people who first read it aloud. The king's body vanishes, but the number remains. Perhaps the figure protects Alulim from historical examination. A ruler who lives for ordinary decades can be compared with wars, droughts, buildings, and neighbouring kings. A ruler who reigns for thousands of years escapes such tests. He becomes symbolic by scale alone. This transformation also benefits later monarchy. If kingship begins with a superhuman duration, every later ruler inherits a fragment of ancient magnificence. The office appears rooted in a time when authority was nearly divine. Even a king ruling only 20 years can claim continuity with that remote beginning. His reign may be short, but the institution behind him seems older than civilization itself. Numbers create legitimacy without argument. They also create loss. As the royal list moves toward more recent periods, reigns gradually become shorter and more plausible. Time contracts, kings become recognizably human, and history begins to resemble the world of archives and inscriptions. The shrinking number suggests decline, distance, or both. Humanity moves away from its primordial condition. What was once vast becomes limited. This pattern appears in many ancient traditions. Early ancestors live longer, stand closer to divine powers, or inhabit a world of unusual abundance. Later generations inherit fragments of that greatness while accepting narrower lives. The story is comforting and melancholy. It says the present world is not the only possible world. Something larger existed near the beginning, whether in memory, imagination, or sacred teaching. Human life now feels brief because primordial time was immeasurable. Perhaps these reigns preserve a philosophical truth rather than a chronological one. Institutions often feel eternal to those born inside them. Kingship may have seemed older than memory, older than cities, and almost older than humanity. How could ordinary numbers describe such authority? A scribe answers by expanding the reign until it becomes landscape. 28,800 years rise like a horizon beyond calculation. You cannot picture every season, birth, and funeral contained within them. The mind eventually releases the attempt. That surrender may be part of the design. The number overwhelms measurement and becomes mystery. It tells you that the first king belongs to a realm where arithmetic meets myth. Clay remains beneath your fingers. The marks are exact. The meaning stays open. A pick enters the side of Abu Shahrain, and the mound answers with compacted clay. The sound is dull, almost wooden, because ancient mud brick has hardened beneath centuries of pressure. Dust slips from the trench wall in thin streams, exposing faint horizontal changes in colour. You watch the excavators descend through occupation levels that once rested beneath open skies. Each layer contains floors, broken vessels, hearths, refuse, and walls altered by later builders. The mound appears natural from a distance, yet its height comes largely from human repetition. People construct, abandon, level, and rebuild. Abu Shahrain attracts serious archaeological attention during the 19th and 20th centuries. Early visitors recognize scattered bricks and pottery across the surface. Some hope for inscriptions, sculptures, or treasure, while others search for the ancient city named in Mesopotamian texts. John George Taylor investigates the mound during the 19th century while working in the region. His methods reflect the standards of his time. When archaeology still favoured dramatic objects over delicate soil relationships, he opens trenches and identifies remains suggesting a major sacred centre. The site does not surrender easily. Its buildings are made largely from mud brick, which can resemble the surrounding earth after erosion. A carved stone palace would be simpler to recognise, but Eridu offers architecture that almost hides inside its own ruin. You lean close to the trench face. One band appears slightly redder than another. A floor forms a thin, compact line, while ash marks a place where fire once burned. Without trained attention, the entire surface would look like ordinary dirt. Later excavators return with more systematic methods. Fuad Savar and Seton Lloyd direct major work during the middle 20th century. Supported by the Iraqi Directorate of Antiquities, their teams record plans, pottery, building sequences, and the vertical relationships between structures. The University of Chicago and other major research institutions later examine these records within broader studies of early southern Mesopotamia. Their work confirms that Eridu preserves a long sequence extending from prehistoric settlement into historical periods. The deeper trenches reveal repeated sacred buildings occupying nearly the same location. These structures change in size and complexity, yet their placement suggests remarkable continuity. Generations rebuild upon inherited ground instead of choosing an entirely new sacred centre. The mound becomes a vertical archive. Archaeologists assign numbers to building levels so plans, pottery, and construction phases can be compared. Such numbering creates order within confusion, although it also gives the ruins a surprisingly bureaucratic personality. Ancient mystery meets filing practice. Workers clear rooms with baskets, brushes, and small tools. Surveyors measure wall lines before the next layer is disturbed. photographs capture surfaces that will never appear exactly the same once excavation continues. Every discovery carries destruction within it. To reach an earlier floor, archaeologists must remove the later one resting above it. Careful recording becomes essential because excavation cannot be reversed. You feel the tension in that process. Somewhere below may lie evidence connected with the earliest authority at Eridu. Yet reaching it requires dismantling the physical sequence that protected it. A foundation deposit might rest inside a wall. A seal impression could lie beneath fallen debris. A fragment of writing may survive within a room filled with ash. Each possibility encourages patience, but expectation can easily outrun evidence. The search for Alulim produces no secure result. No excavated inscription from Eridu identifies him as king. No building dedication names him as patron. No administrative record dates an event to his reign. The material remains confirm an ancient settlement, but they do not attach its earliest phases to the ruler known from literary tradition. This absence creates an uncomfortable division. The city belongs to archaeology, while the king remains almost entirely within texts copied much later. Their association is culturally powerful, yet materially unproven. You stand beside a wall older than writing and understand the problem immediately. The people who built it could not leave a written royal title if their society had not developed that practice. Their silence may reflect chronology rather than insignificance. A ruler can exist without inscriptions. Human communities organize leadership long before they create durable written archives. Authority may be announced through clothing, ritual position, residence, food distribution, or public speech. None of these survives reliably within a collapsed mud brick room. Still, archaeology cannot confirm a named individual through possibility alone. A missing inscription does not prove Alulim existed, just as the absence of one does not prove he was invented. Scholars continue debating how far archaeological silence should shape interpretations of legendary rulers. Some argue that without contemporary evidence, Alulim belongs firmly to mythology. Others suggest that prehistoric leadership could survive only as transformed memory within later scribal tradition. The dispute remains unresolved because both positions recognize the same gap. Material evidence reaches deep into Eridu's past, while written names appear much later. One quirky detail concerns the practical dangers faced by early excavators. Desert winds can refill shallow trenches almost as quickly as workers clear them. A carefully exposed floor may vanish beneath drifting sand before drawing and photography are complete. The ancient city seems to bury itself again. Heat creates another difficulty. Mud brick surfaces can dry and crack and crumble once exposed to open air. Walls preserved underground for millennia may begin deteriorating during the very process that reveals them. Archaeology therefore becomes a race between knowledge and decay. Excavators must document fragile structures while protecting them from sun, wind, and careless footsteps. The reward is rarely a golden object. Often, the reward is a line on a plan. You watch a draftsman trace the outline of a room that no longer possesses a roof. Doorways indicate movement, while wall thickness suggests construction choices. The plan looks clean and rational. Unlike the irregular trench surrounding it, a palace might reveal large reception spaces, controlled entrances, storage rooms, and evidence of elite residence. Yet early Eridu refuses to provide an unmistakable royal complex associated with Alulim. That absence matters because kings usually express power through architecture. Later Mesopotamian rulers build palaces, fortifications, temples, and commemorative monuments. Their names appear within foundations so gods and future generations will remember them. Alulim receives none of this material visibility. Perhaps his supposed reign belongs to a period when political authority lacked monumental architecture. Perhaps the ruler was imagined centuries later, then placed within a settlement whose antiquity inspired reverence. A third possibility remains quietly present. Archaeologists may not have uncovered the relevant area. Abu Shahrain covers a broad and complicated landscape, while excavations investigate only portions of the site. Unopened ground still exists. This thought attracts hopeful minds because it preserves the mystery. An inscription could remain beneath an untouched slope, sealed inside a foundation, or broken among debris not yet examined. Future methods may detect structures without removing every layer. Yet responsible interpretation cannot depend upon discoveries that have not occurred. Archaeology builds arguments from surviving evidence, not wished-for objects. You descend toward the lowest exposed levels, the trench grows narrower, and the upper walls block much of the horizon. Sunlight reaches the floor only at certain hours, leaving the deepest spaces cool and strangely enclosed. Here, the mound feels less like a ruin and more like compressed time. Centuries stand above your head in bands of clay. Every level once formed the present for people who never imagined themselves ancient. They repaired walls, carried food, argued over duties, and watched storms cross the plain. Their lives were complete, although only fragments remain. The first king may have belonged among them, or he may have existed only in later imagination. The trench offers no declaration. A final brushstroke clears another floor, pottery fragments rest near a wall, and a dark patch marks an old hearth. Nothing bears a royal name. The search continues through absence itself. Cold air settles inside the trench as another floor emerges from compacted clay. The surface is thin, smooth, and slightly darker than the soil beneath it. Along one edge, a wall bends toward a doorway that once controlled movement into a sacred room. The building is not alone. Beneath it rests another sanctuary, then another, each one raised upon the remains of an older structure. Archaeologists identify a long sequence of sacred buildings at Eridu, commonly described as 16 temple levels. Their plans change across centuries, but the location remains remarkably consistent. You feel the weight of that continuity. A temple does not survive here because its bricks resist time. Mud brick weakens under rain, heat, salt, and neglect. The sanctuary survives because people repeatedly choose to rebuild it. Every new foundation becomes an act of recognition. The builders know that sacred power already belongs to this ground. They do not search for a more convenient location. They return to the inherited center, level damaged rooms, and place new walls over familiar lines. Memory directs the architecture. The earliest structures are modest, perhaps no larger than an ordinary house. Their rooms contain raised platforms, offering places, and arrangements suggesting controlled ritual activity. Later buildings become more formal, elevated, and carefully organized. University research on early Mesopotamian architecture has shown that temples often develop gradually from small communal buildings into monumental institutions. Eridu offers one of the clearest material sequences for observing that transformation across an immense span of time. You look downward through the exposed levels and imagine each sanctuary standing beneath its own sky. One building receives morning light through a narrow entrance. Another rises during an age when nearby channels have shifted. A later temple overlooks a settlement larger than its builders' ancestors could have imagined. Every structure feels permanent while it is occupied. Priests sweep the floors, repair plaster, and prepare offerings. Families approach during festivals carrying fish, grain, wool, or vessels of clean water. Children learn where they may stand and which doorways remain forbidden. Then walls begin to crack. A roof collapses during a storm, or moisture damages the lower courses. Smoke blackens plaster, foundations settle, and repairs become less effective. Eventually, the community decides that rebuilding will serve better than continued patching. The old sanctuary is not simply discarded. Its remains become the platform for renewal. Sacred history stays physically present beneath each new floor. This practice creates a rising mound of devotion. The temple climbs upward because generations refuse to abandon the place below. Ruin becomes foundation rather than failure. There is something quietly comforting in that idea. The builders do not erase decay, they incorporate it. Broken walls support new walls, and damaged floors carry later ceremonies. Sacred continuity depends upon accepting destruction as part of construction. One unusual feature of the Eridu sequence concerns the persistence of similar internal arrangements. Several levels preserve a central room with an offering table and a raised platform positioned along the walls. These repeated elements suggest ritual habits surviving even as architectural scale changes. Perhaps worshippers recognize the room immediately. The dimensions differ, yet movement follows familiar paths. The sacred platform occupies its expected place, and offerings arrive through the proper entrance. Ritual prefers repetition. A person entering the renewed sanctuary may feel that nothing essential has changed. The bricks are fresh, the plaster brighter, and the roof stronger. Still, the divine presence remains where grandparents remembered it. Such continuity can create authority more powerful than any royal proclamation. A ruler may command for one lifetime. A sanctuary rebuilt across centuries appears to stand outside individual ambition. Enki's household becomes older than every king. This matters when considering the first ruler of Eridu. If kingship enters a city already organized around sacred continuity, the king does not create the center of power. He approaches a place whose authority precedes him. His legitimacy may depend upon service to the sanctuary. He provides labor, protects offerings, maintains channels, and supports at ceremonies. The temple gives his office sacred depth, while his administration gives the temple material strength. The relationship is mutual, but not equal. A ruler can die, lose a war, or be forgotten. The sacred ground remains. Another leader may appear, yet the temple continues to occupy its inherited location. Scholars remain divided over whether the earliest buildings should all be called temples. Some researchers interpret the smaller structures as shrines serving a growing community. Others argue that several may have combined domestic, administrative, and ceremonial functions. The distinction is difficult because early society does not separate religion, economy, and household life in modern ways. A room used for offerings may also store food or host communal decisions. Sacred and practical duties often occupy the same space. Archaeology reveals patterns, not spoken explanations. A raised platform suggests focused activity, but its exact meaning cannot be recovered with certainty. A cluster of vessels may represent ritual preparation, shared meals, or ordinary storage. Even repeated rebuilding can reflect social prestige as well as devotion. Still, the sequence remains extraordinary. People continue investing labor in the same location despite environmental change and architectural failure. That persistence demands explanation. Perhaps the sanctuary marks a remembered source of fresh water. Perhaps an early ritual event gives the place lasting prestige. Perhaps generations simply inherit the conviction that divine wisdom resides there. Belief grows stronger through use. The longer a community worships at one location, the more stories gather around it. Ancestors become associated with its walls. Important decisions are remembered as having occurred nearby. A newborn receives blessings where a grandparent once stood. Eventually, abandoning the place becomes almost unthinkable. One quirky possibility concerns the sounds within these mud brick rooms. Thick walls soften outside noise, while low roofs deepen voices and footsteps. A priest chanting near a plastered wall may produce a resonance that feels larger than the room itself. The effect requires no hidden machinery. Simple architecture can transform the human voice into something unfamiliar. You enter the imagined sanctuary at dusk. An oil lamp flickers beside a clay platform. Smoke curls upward, and the scent of heated fat mixes with damp plaster. A low chant begins near the wall. then spreads through the room with a soft vibration. The god does not need to appear. Atmosphere performs part of the work. Controlled movement, dim light, repeated words, and inherited space create a sense of presence. Worshippers know they stand above earlier sanctuaries, even if they cannot see them. The ground becomes layered with invisible witnesses. Each rebuilding also requires planning beyond the ritual moment. Workers gather clay, shape bricks, transport reeds, prepare plaster, and organize food for laborers. Someone assigns tasks and decides how closely the new walls should follow the old plan. Temple construction therefore reveals institutional strength. A community capable of rebuilding repeatedly possesses memory, coordination, and authority. These qualities approach the foundations of kingship. Perhaps early rulers gain influence by directing sacred labor. A leader who mobilizes workers for Enki's sanctuary demonstrates both practical ability and divine favor. The building becomes proof that society can act as one body. Yet no inscription names the organizer of the earliest levels. The walls preserve collective effort while concealing personal credit. Hundreds of hands create the sanctuary, but history does not remember their owners. That anonymity suits the architecture. The sequence tells a story larger than any single reign. It records endurance through repeated loss, renewal through inherited design, and authority rooted in place rather than personality. Night deepens above the mound, and shadows fill the excavated rooms. One temple outline disappears into another until the levels become difficult to separate. The walls seem to merge into a single sacred structure built across thousands of years. You no longer see 16 temples. You see one sanctuary repeatedly dreaming itself into existence, each generation adding another layer to Enki's silent house. The cold surface of a clay platform presses faintly against your fingertips. It rises only slightly above the surrounding floor, hardly grand enough for a throne. A small room surrounds it, bounded by walls that would fit comfortably inside a later temple courtyard. Nothing here announces monarchy. There are no carved lions guarding an entrance. No processional avenue carries tribute toward a palace. The building offers a platform, a few vessels, a controlled space, and signs of repeated care. Its modest scale feels closer to a household shrine than a royal institution. Yet this small structure may preserve a decisive social change. The earliest communities at Eridu do not begin with towering architecture. Their ceremonial buildings develop from forms resembling ordinary houses. Although certain features distinguish them from domestic rooms, a raised place receives attention, while movement through the building appears carefully arranged. Archaeologists from institutions including the University of Chicago have studied similar early buildings across southern Mesopotamia. Their work suggests that communal ritual spaces could emerge gradually from domestic traditions. Sacred authority may have grown inside familiar architecture before becoming monumental. You imagine a respected household living nearby. Its members store grain, repair fishing nets, prepare meals, and maintain relationships with neighboring families. One person also tends the sacred room, cleanses its platform, and receives offerings brought by others. That duty creates influence. A ritual caretaker knows the sequence of ceremonies and the proper handling of valued objects. He or she remembers seasonal observances, family obligations, and stories explaining why the location matters. Knowledge becomes authority because not everyone possesses it equally. The authority remains quiet. People enter voluntarily, perhaps carrying fish, dates, milk, grain, or crafted goods. They seek protection, favourable water, healthy children, or relief from uncertainty. The caretaker receives these offerings and performs actions whose meaning belongs to inherited tradition. No crown is required. Such a person may resemble a priest. Although the title can mislead, later temple priesthoods possess defined offices, property, training, and administrative duties. The earliest ritual specialists may have occupied less formal roles within large households. Their authority could combine age, ancestry, practical wisdom, and sacred reputation. A skilled healer might also lead ceremonies. A household head could manage storage while interpreting omens. One person may carry several responsibilities that later institutions divide among specialists. Society begins through overlapping roles. You hear grinding stones in a nearby courtyard. Someone crushes grain while another shapes damp clay into a small bowl. Children carry reeds toward a roof under repair. The sacred room stands among these ordinary sounds rather than apart from them. This closeness matters. Religion does not yet occupy a separate monumental district. It grows from daily life, sharing materials, labour, and space with households. A family supporting the shrine may gradually gain prestige. Visitors bring offerings, request judgments, and acknowledge the family's connection with sacred power. Stored goods accumulate. Relationships widen, and ritual service becomes an economic advantage. Prestige can harden into office. The process needs no conspiracy. A household repeatedly trusted with communal duties begins to appear naturally suited for leadership. Its members coordinate repairs, settle disagreements, and organize food during ceremonies. Over generations, responsibility becomes inheritance. Children learn the rituals of their parents, and sacred knowledge remains within the same lineage. The community may accept this continuity because familiarity feels stable. The arrangement also carries risk. A family controlling offerings and sacred knowledge can shape collective decisions. What begins as service may become privilege, especially when resources grow scarce. The shrine becomes a center of negotiation. A curious detail from early ritual life concerns miniature objects sometimes found within ancient sacred contexts. Tiny vessels, animal figures, and small tools may have represented gifts, symbols, or substitutes for the larger offerings. Their exact purpose remains uncertain, but their size gives them an unexpectedly intimate quality. One could almost imagine a solemn ceremony interrupted by someone presenting a clay vessel smaller than a plum. Humour aside, miniatures show how meaning does not depend upon material size. A tiny object may carry the value of a full offering when ritual convention gives it power. The same principle may apply to the shrine itself. The building is small, but its social importance may be large. You stand near the entrance and notice how the doorway controls access. Only a few people can enter comfortably at once. Most participants may remain outside, hearing words and movements without seeing every action. Restricted visibility creates mystery. Those inside possess privileged access to sacred space. They handle offerings, approach the platform, and interpret what occurs. Those outside depend upon their report. This physical arrangement can produce hierarchy even without formal kingship. Architecture separates participants from specialists, creating different levels of knowledge and proximity. The Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures at the University of Chicago has long emphasized how built space can reveal social organization. Doorways, platforms, storage areas, and movement patterns often expose relationships not preserved in writing. At Eridu, the earliest shrine suggests coordination without proving monarchy. People recognize a central place, maintain it, and organize repeated activity around it. These are foundations of institutional life. They are not yet a palace. An open scholarly dispute concerns whether early temple institutions created as a political authority or merely expressed authority already held by powerful households. Some historians see ritual centers as engines of social complexity. Others believe economic inequality and family leadership developed alongside them. The distinction remains difficult because the same evidence supports several readings. Storage may indicate communal redistribution, household wealth, or offerings reserved for ceremonies. A large room may host worship, councils, feasts, or all three. You cannot separate these functions neatly. A communal meal may strengthen alliances while honouring a deity. Repairing a shrine may also train workers for irrigation projects. A ritual leader may become a political negotiator, because trusted authority travels easily between settings. Leadership grows through usefulness. The earliest ruler imagined at Eridu may therefore stand at the end of a long transformation. He need not appear suddenly with soldiers and royal symbols. His office could emerge from households already managing ritual, food, labour, and memory. Perhaps the first king was initially the guardian of a sacred place. He might have supervised offerings, directed communal work, and spoken during crises. People obeyed because his household served the deity and preserved inherited knowledge. Political power would then develop inside sacred service rather than outside it. This remains speculation. No surviving object identifies a prehistoric priest who became king. Archaeology can reveal increasing coordination, but it cannot follow one person's rise through undocumented generations. Still, the modest shrine changes the question. Instead of asking where the palace stood, you begin asking whether a palace was necessary. The earliest form of rule may have occupied a room scarcely larger than a family gathering space. Power does not always begin loudly. Sometimes it begins with access, memory keys, and trust. One household tends the sacred platform, another brings offerings, a third requests judgment during a dispute over water. Gradually, the caretaker becomes indispensable. The clay walls hold no portrait of that person. Their surfaces preserve only repairs, plaster and mope, under the pressure of vanished hands. Yet the arrangement hints at a society learning how to place authority within a permanent location. The shrine anchors responsibility. Whoever serves it stands near the centre of communal life. Outside, evening smoke drifts between low houses, dogs move through narrow paths, and cooking fires release the scent of fish and grain. The sacred building does not tower above this settlement. It rests quietly among the people. Its modesty may reveal the earliest shape of power more clearly than a palace could. Authority begins close to the ground, inside a room of clay, where service slowly becomes privilege and memory slowly becomes rule. The scent reaches you first, faint but persistent beneath the dry earth. Burned grain, fish oil, smoke, and damp clay seem to gather around the ancient floor. Nothing remains fresh. Yet the arrangement of debris still suggests meals prepared with unusual care. Near one wall, archaeologists recover fish bones mixed with ash and broken pottery. Some fragments belong to shallow bowls, while others come from larger storage vessels. Their surfaces carry painted patterns, soot stains, or traces of repeated handling. These objects belong to people whose names have vanished. You picture a family approaching the sacred building at first light. One person carries fish wrapped in reeds, another holds a vessel filled with grain or clean water. A child follows quietly, trying not to drop a small clay cup. The offering is modest, but modest gifts can still carry serious meaning. A household gives what it can gather, preserve, or produce. The value lies not only in quantity, but in the act of surrender. Archaeological records from Eridu confirm that fish played an important role in local life. The surrounding wetlands supported many species, while canals and shallow waters made fishing a dependable activity. Researchers at the University of Chicago have compared animal remains, pottery, and settlement patterns across southern Mesopotamia to reconstruct this watery economy. Fish becomes food, trade, labour, and possibly ritual. Its presence inside a sacred building does not automatically prove sacrifice. Bones may come from communal meals, offerings, temple kitchens, or discarded remains swept into a corner. Archaeology can identify species more easily than intention. That difficulty follows every object. A bowl placed beside a platform may appear ceremonial, but someone could have used it for an ordinary meal. Ash may mark incense, cooking, burned offerings, or a damaged roof. The floor preserves action without explaining the mood surrounding it. You must rebuild that mood carefully. Imagine the heat inside the room during late afternoon. Clay walls release warmth gathered beneath the sun. Smoke rises toward a reed roof and escapes through small openings. The smell of fish mixes with grain, oil, and plaster. An attendant kneels beside the platform. She pours water from one vessel into another, perhaps cleansing the surface before food is presented. Her movements follow an order learned through repetition. She knows which bowl belongs nearest the wall. She knows when the door should remain open. She knows whether the household waits inside or stands outside in silence. Such knowledge creates continuity. Offerings may support the deity, the sanctuary, and the people serving it. Food placed within sacred space does not necessarily remain untouched. In many later Mesopotamian temples, divine meals eventually passed to priests, workers, or elite households. The god receives the honor, humans manage the leftovers. That arrangement may sound conveniently practical, and it probably was. Sacred systems often survive because spiritual duty and material necessity cooperate. A temple cannot operate through reverence alone, especially when roofs leak and attendants require supper. At Eridu, offerings may also help redistribute food within the community. Households bring portions of their produce, while temple authorities store, prepare, or share them during ceremonies. Such exchanges strengthen social bonds and make the sacred center economically significant, yet the evidence remains incomplete. Scholars continue debating whether early temples controlled large communal surpluses or received smaller gifts during occasional rituals. Some researchers imagine growing institutions managing food and labor. Others warn that later temple economies should not be projected too confidently into prehistoric Eridu. The open question concerns scale. A few jars can support a ceremony without proving centralized taxation. Repeated storage rooms may suggest organized collection, but they could also belong to a wealthy household. The boundary between communal service and institutional control remains uncertain. You look at the pottery more closely. Painted vessels from early southern Mesopotamia often carry geometric designs, curved bands, and repeating shapes. Their patterns may reflect regional traditions, household identity, aesthetic pleasure, or meanings now lost. A bowl decorated with careful lines requires time beyond simple usefulness. Someone prepares the clay, shapes the vessel, smooths its surface, adds pigment, and controls the firing. The finished object carries labor before it carries food. To place such a bowl within a shrine gives the offering another layer of value. The container itself becomes part of the gift. One quirky discovery from early Mesopotamian sites concerns vessels shaped with tiny spouts, unusual handles, or forms that seem almost impractical. Some may have served pouring rituals, while others perhaps displayed the potter's creativity. Ancient people also enjoyed making objects that confused later experts. It is one of their more enduring traditions. A vessel with a narrow opening might release liquid slowly across a platform. A perforated container could strain grain, prepare drink, or scatter drops during purification. The same form may support several interpretations. You hear liquid touching clay. The sound is soft, brief, and absorbed quickly by the room. A few drops darken the plaster, then disappear. The gesture leaves almost no trace for archaeology, yet it may carry enormous emotional weight for the participant. Perhaps the offering follows illness, childbirth, drought, or safe return from the marsh. Perhaps a family fulfills a promise made during danger. Their gratitude enters the room through food, water, and spoken words that no tablet records. Social history often survives in such ordinary remains. Kings receive monuments, but communities leave bones, soot, and fingerprints. A cracked bowl may reveal more about daily devotion than a royal inscription praising divine favor. The people of Eridu do not worship through abstract belief alone. They bring substances touched by work. Fish require catching and cleaning. Grain requires planting, tsutting, harvesting, grinding, and storage. Every offering contains time. A basket of food represents hours of labour removed from household use. Giving it away demonstrates trust, obligation, fear, gratitude, or social pressure. Several emotions may exist together. A poor family may sacrifice more deeply through a small gift than a wealthy household through abundance. Archaeology cannot measure that difference. It sees the vessel, not the hunger left behind. You sense the quiet humanity of this exchange. An old man places a bowl near the sacred platform. His hands shake slightly, and the painted rim touches the floor with a hollow sound. He steps backward according to custom. The attendant watches without speaking. Outside, reeds scrape against the wall in the evening wind. The offering remains between human need and divine silence. No miracle is required. The act itself restores order. The family has done what tradition expects. Anxiety gains a shape, and gratitude receives a place. Ritual turns private emotion into shared action. This may be one reason sacred buildings endure. They contain experiences that ordinary houses cannot hold comfortably. Fear, hope, loss, and obligation become manageable when given repeated forms. Food also creates community through shared consumption. A ceremonial meal gathers households, reinforces alliances, and confirms belonging. People who eat together acknowledge one another within a common order. The sanctuary may therefore function as a place where social bonds are renewed. Offerings do not travel only upward toward the deity. They move sideways among families, workers, attendants, and leaders. Power grows within that circulation. Whoever receives, stores, and distributes offerings gains influence. Decisions concerning portions can reward loyalty, recognize status, or support vulnerable households. A sacred duty gradually becomes an administrative responsibility. The first rulers of Eridu may have emerged near such exchanges. Control over food, ritual, and communal labour can create authority without military conquest. A leader who organises offerings also learns who owes what, who needs help, and which households command respect. The pottery records no title. Still, its placement reveals a community acting through shared expectations. People return to the sacred room because they believe the exchange matters. Their gifts support a system linking divine presence with practical life. Night settles over the settlement, and cooking fires dim beside low houses. Inside the sanctuary, a final bowl rests near the platform. Fish bones, ash, and fragments of grain remain where careful hands once placed them. The first king may still be absent from the earth, but his people are not. They survive through the things they carried, burned, broke, shared, and surrendered. The rough wall beside you belongs to a building large enough for ceremony, yet too uncertain for royalty. Its rooms follow sacred patterns rather than obvious domestic comfort. Storage spaces exist, but no grand audience hall declares the presence of a king. Eridu keeps its palace hidden. Across later Mesopotamian cities, royal residences often reveal themselves through scale, controlled entrances, reception rooms, courtyards, storage areas, and administrative tablets. Thick walls protect private spaces, while broad halls allow rulers to receive officials, petitioners, and foreign guests. Such buildings express hierarchy through movement. A visitor passes guards, doorways, courtyards, and waiting areas before approaching the ruler. Architecture turns distance into authority. At Eridu, that pattern remains difficult to identify within the earlier settlement levels. Excavators uncover sacred buildings with long histories, but no unquestioned palace belonging to the age of Alulim. The city offers a divine household more clearly than a royal one. This absence creates a serious problem. If kingship first settles at Eridu, where does its first ruler live? A king without a palace may still govern, but later political imagination usually expects him to occupy a distinct residence. His household should consume goods, host dependents, and display status. Archaeologists search for those signs through building plans and discarded objects. Imported materials may indicate wealth. Fine pottery can suggest elite dining, while seal impressions may reveal administrative control. Large storage rooms could support a court, and unusual burials might identify a privileged family. No single clue is sufficient. A large house may belong to merchants, temple officials, or several families. Fine pottery may arrive through ritual offerings rather than private luxury. Storage can support communal needs without proving royal ownership. You step through an excavated doorway and enter a room open to the sky. Wind moves along the lower walls, lifting dust from corners. The floor contains no throne base, royal seal, or weapon placed for display. Only fragments remain. The missing palace may reflect the nature of early leadership rather than failed excavation. A ruler in prehistoric Eridu might live within an ordinary but respected household. His authority could depend upon ritual position, kinship, and control of labour instead of architectural separation. Monumental palaces require resources, specialists, and an accepted social distance between rulers and residents. Those conditions may develop gradually. A leader can command obedience long before society builds him an enormous residence. The earliest king may sleep behind simple clay walls. His household could stand near the sacred centre, where access to offerings and meetings strengthens influence. Visitors might recognize the residence through custom rather than size. Everyone knows which doorway belongs to the leader, even when archaeology sees only another house. That possibility is difficult to prove because social knowledge rarely leaves durable traces. A building can look ordinary after the symbols marking its status disappear. Painted reeds, woven hangings, wooden furniture, and ceremonial clothing decay completely. Prestige may vanish faster than brick. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania have emphasized that early political power often appears through networks of households rather than isolated royal compounds. Wealth, marriage, ritual service, and labor obligations can create authority without a sharply defined palace institution. In such a system, the ruler's residence may be dispersed. Relatives occupy nearby houses, storage remains distributed, and meetings occur inside sacred or communal buildings. Power exists across relationships rather than behind one monumental wall. The temple may also perform duties later associated with palaces. It receives goods, directs workers, stores supplies, and hosts ceremonial gatherings. A leader connected with the sanctuary could govern through its existing rooms. This arrangement would make the palace almost unnecessary. The divine household already possesses prestige, organized labor, and sacred legitimacy. Building a separate royal center might even seem improper when human authority depends upon service to Enki. The ruler approaches the god's house as caretaker, not competitor. His office gains strength by remaining close to sacred space. A palace towering beside the sanctuary could suggest rivalry with the divine owner of the city. Later kings often manage this tension through construction. They restore temples, dedicate offerings, and describe themselves as servants chosen by the gods. Their palaces display wealth, yet their inscriptions insist that divine approval makes such wealth legitimate. Eridu's earliest leadership may belong to a stage before that balance requires separate monuments. Temple and government remain difficult to distinguish because the same people manage ritual, food, labor, and disputes. Scholars continue debating whether this overlap reflects genuine unity or limited archaeological visibility. Some historians argue that temple institutions dominate early urban organization. Others believe elite households exist independently, even when their residences remain unidentified. The disagreement concerns evidence and definition. What qualifies as a palace? Must it contain a throne room, private quarters, offices, and defensive walls? Could a cluster of connected houses serve the same purpose without following later architectural conventions? Modern labels can hide ancient flexibility. A building becomes a palace because royal life occurs inside it, not because it satisfies a timeless checklist. One unusual possibility suggests that elite residences used large quantities of reeds and timber over low mud brick foundations. Such structures could feel impressive when standing, with woven walls, shaded halls, and decorated roofs. Their upper sections would leave little archaeological evidence after abandonment. A king might inhabit magnificence made from perishable materials. The image seems almost too delicate for royalty. Yet marsh societies can create elaborate architecture from reeds, ropes, mats, and plaster. Size and beauty do not require stone. A broad reception hall could rise beside the water, supported by bundled reeds and covered with patterned textiles. Visitors would see colour, movement, and polished furnishings. Centuries later, only shallow foundations and scattered clay would remain. This suggestion attracts imagination, but evidence stays limited. Perishable palaces cannot explain every missing royal structure. They merely remind you that archaeology favours durable materials and quietly discriminates against reeds. Stone boasts for millennia, matting does not. Another possibility places the palace beyond the excavated zones. Archaeological trenches sample only portions of a settlement, while ancient cities spread unevenly across changing ground. Residential and administrative districts may lie beneath unexamined areas or eroded slopes. The royal household could also move as channels shift and neighbourhoods change. A residence built near one watercourse may be abandoned when transport patterns alter. Later construction could level its remains beyond recognition. Absence therefore carries several meanings. The palace may never have existed, may remain unexcavated, may have resembled an ordinary house, or may have been built from fragile materials. Each answer changes Alulim. A monumental palace would make him a recognizable king, supported by servants, administrators, and ceremonial display. An ordinary residence would suggest leadership rooted in household authority. A temple-based court would place him beneath sacred institutions. A non-existent palace would strengthen the possibility that he belongs entirely to later tradition. You stand at the edge of the mound while evening cools the exposed walls. The sacred precinct remains visible through its repeated plans, but royal space dissolves into uncertainty. Perhaps that uncertainty reveals the earliest nature of power. Authority may exist before architecture learns how to display it. A leader can direct work, settle disputes, and represent the community without sitting inside a vast hall. His palace may be the gathering itself. People assemble in a courtyard, bringing complaints, offerings, and reports concerning fields or channels. The leader listens beneath a shaded roof while elders speak nearby. No throne separates him from the group, although custom gives his words unusual weight. Such a scene leaves almost nothing behind. The roof decays, the matting disappears, and the voices fade. Archaeologists recover a floor and several walls, then debate whether anything royal occurred there. The missing palace remains more than an architectural puzzle. It asks when leadership becomes kingship, and when kingship begins demanding a separate home. Eridu gives no simple answer. Its first ruler stands without visible chambers, guarded gates, or royal decoration. He may govern from a temple office, a family compound, a reed hall, or nowhere at all. The city preserves the office in memory, yet the building refuses to appear. A cool iron latch rests beneath your hand, though the imagined doorway is built from reed and clay. Inside, a man stands near the sacred platform, wearing no visible crown. He carries a vessel of clean water and speaks words known only through memory. Is he a priest, a king, or both? The question seems simple until the titles begin to dissolve. Modern minds prefer clear offices, written duties, and separate buildings. Early Eridu may have organised authority through overlapping roles that never required such sharp boundaries. A ritual leader could direct offerings, settle disputes, supervise labour, and represent the community during danger. Each task strengthens the others. Sacred knowledge creates trust, while practical success gives sacred claims greater weight. Alulim may belong to this uncertain world. The King List calls him a ruler, yet it provides no description of his daily responsibilities. It does not show him commanding soldiers, collecting tribute, or judging criminals. His identity is defined almost entirely through position and duration. He rules first. That phrase may describe political command, ritual guardianship, ancestral prestige, or a later interpretation of something older. The title preserved by scribes does not guarantee that Alulim would recognize the same word. Language changes as institutions change. A respected leader in prehistoric Eridu may hold authority through lineage and ritual service. Centuries later, scribes living beneath developed monarchies could translate that older position into familiar royal language. The transformation would not require deliberate invention. People often understand unfamiliar societies through their own institutions. A guardian becomes a governor, a war leader becomes a king, and a sacred elder becomes a priest. Each label simplifies. You enter a courtyard where several households have gathered beneath woven shade. An elderly figure listens while two families dispute access to a narrow water channel. He does not carry a weapon, yet both sides accept his decision. His authority comes from memory, reputation, and sacred responsibility. He knows which family maintained the channel, which boundary was agreed, and which offering accompanied the original arrangement. The judgment feels practical and religious at once. Water belongs to daily survival, but it also carries Enki's presence. A decision concerning flow can therefore become a sacred act. The person who interprets divine order may also determine how resources are shared. That combination can produce kingship gradually. Researchers at Yale University have examined how early Mesopotamian offices developed from temple service, household leadership, and communal administration. Their studies emphasize that political authority may grow through accumulated duties rather than sudden royal invention. A leader becomes central because many problems pass through his hands. He remembers obligation, coordinates labor, receives offerings, and speaks during emergencies. Eventually, the community cannot imagine order without his office. The person may die, but the role remains. His successor inherits more than responsibilities. He receives stories explaining why the office deserves obedience. Rituals mark the transfer, and symbols distinguish the new holder from ordinary households. A staff, garment, vessel, or seat can become royal without resembling a later crown. Authority first appears through recognition, not glitter. One fringe tradition imagines Alulim receiving wisdom from a supernatural sage linked with the watery depths. Later accounts connect primordial kings with mysterious teachers who guide humanity towards civilized life. Some modern enthusiasts treat these teachers as visitors from another world. Archaeology offers no support for that idea, although it remains impressively difficult to discourage. The older symbolic reading is more revealing. A king receives knowledge because leadership requires more than strength. He must understand ritual order, food, water, measurement, and the habits binding people together. Such wisdom sounds priestly, yet priesthood itself may be the wrong category. The earliest caretaker of sacred space might also farm, fish, trade, and lead communal work. Specialized religious professions become clearer only when institutions grow large enough to support full-time offices. Eridu's earliest leaders may live inside ordinary economic life. They do not withdraw from society. They stand at its busiest crossing point. You smell crushed herbs warming beside a lamp. Several attendants prepare bowls while workers gather outside the building. A leader enters, checks the offerings, then discusses repairs to a damaged embankment. Nothing separates ritual from administration. The same authority governs both because the community experiences them as connected. Water management preserves life, while ceremony preserves meaning. Neglecting either threatens order. Could Alulim have been remembered because he mastered this connection? Perhaps his name once belonged to a ritual household whose members directed communal labour. Their leadership might stretch across generations, later compressed into one impossible reign. A dynastic memory could become a single sacred figure. The household disappears, but its founding ancestor remains. This possibility attracts some scholars because it explains both the enormous reign and the missing biography. Alulim would represent an office or lineage rather than one body living across thousands of years. However, no contemporary tablet identifies such a lineage. The theory remains plausible without becoming proven. An open scholarly debate continues over whether early Mesopotamian rulers emerged primarily from priestly authority, military leadership, or elite households controlling resources. Researchers at Oxford University have warned against treating one pathway as universal. Different cities may follow different patterns. A settlement exposed to conflict could favour a war leader. A rich trading centre might elevate merchant households. A sacred place dependent upon water management could place ritual administrators near political power. Eridu seems especially suited to the third pattern, though certainty remains distant. Its identity gathers around Enki's sanctuary, organised labour, and control of vital water. A priest-king becomes tempting. The phrase itself creates problems. It suggests one person holding two clearly defined offices, although those offices may not yet exist separately. The leader is not half priest and half king. He may simply be the recognised centre of order. Later observers divide his activities because their societies possess specialists. One official serves the temple, another commands soldiers, and another supervises estates. Earlier leadership could combine these functions without feeling unusual. You watch the courtyard meeting continue. The leader receives a bowl from one family, then places it near the sacred room. He listens to a report concerning damaged reeds along a canal bank. A child approaches with a fever, and the family requests a blessing. Each action confirms his position. He does not need an army when custom, fear, gratitude, and dependence already surround him. His power lives within relationships repeated across years. Still, a peaceful authority should not be romanticized. Control over ritual and resources can become coercive. A household managing offerings may favour allies, demand labour, or punish rivals through exclusion. Sacred legitimacy can protect communities, but it can also shield privilege. Perhaps the first king appears when service becomes command. A caretaker begins deciding rather than advising. A respected household turns inherited responsibility into permanent superiority. The transition leaves no clear archaeological scar. No flaw marks the moment when leadership becomes monarchy. No pottery style announces that obedience has changed. Social transformation may occur gradually inside familiar rooms. The same platform remains, the same offerings arrive, only the meaning of authority deepens. Alulim's silence allows every possibility to gather around him. He may be a priest remembered as king, a king who performs sacred duties, or a symbolic ancestor representing both. The ancient text refuses to choose. You stand beneath the woven roof while evening shadows lengthen across the courtyard. The leader raises a vessel, speaks quietly, and pours water upon the ground. People watch because the act matters. They also watch because he performs it. Perhaps kingship begins in that difference. Wax smoke curls through the scribal room, carrying a faint sweetness above freshly prepared clay. Your eyes follow columns of numerical signs. each mark small enough to hide an age. And the tablet does not merely count rulers, it builds a hidden architecture of time. The earliest reigns form a sequence whose proportions appear carefully chosen. 8 rulers govern 5 cities before the Great Flood interrupts their world. Together, their reigns reach 241,200 years. That total is deliberate. Ancient scribes trained within mathematical traditions capable of handling enormous quantities with confidence. They calculated field areas, grain rations, labour schedules, and commercial obligations. They also copied numerical tables whose values extended far beyond daily administrative needs. Large numbers belong to education as well as imagination. The reigns fit units familiar within the 60-base system used throughout Mesopotamian scholarship. Some values divide neatly into groups carrying recognizable mathematical relationships. Their arrangement suggests planning, even when their intended message remains uncertain. You picture a scribe moving counters across a board before pressing signs into clay. He does not invent each figure through sudden inspiration. He works within conventions learned from teachers, tablets, and older compositions. Numbers arrive carrying cultural memories. A reign lasting many thousands of years separates primordial rulers from ordinary kings, yet the entire sequence does something more subtle. It creates stages within sacred antiquity, giving remote time an internal order rather than leaving it shapeless. Each city receives a portion of that immeasurable duration. Kingship moves, reigns accumulate, and the approaching flood remains invisible to those living within the list. The reader knows catastrophe waits, which gives every enormous number a quiet fragility. Even vast time can end. The total may represent completeness rather than chronology. Ancient mathematical culture often used balanced quantities, repeated factors, and convenient divisions. Such structures helped scribes organize information while also producing a sense of harmony. Researchers associated with Oxford University have shown that Mesopotamian learned texts frequently combine calculation with literary design. Numerical order can guide composition without turning every number into a secret code. That distinction matters. A pattern may be meaningful without carrying one hidden solution. The reigns could express sacred distance, political legitimacy, mathematical elegance, and inherited tradition simultaneously. Ancient authors were comfortable allowing several meanings to occupy the same clay. Modern readers often demand one answer. Some seek an astronomical key, matching reign totals with planetary movements, eclipses, or long celestial cycles. Others divide the years into smaller units, hoping to recover ordinary human lifespans beneath the enormous figures. The results vary widely. A calculation may appear persuasive until another tablet preserves a different number. Changing one unit can produce an entirely new alignment. Selecting convenient values makes almost any cosmic pattern possible with enough patience. Fringe numerologists sometimes connect the antediluvian total with the slow movement of stars across the heavens. Their diagrams can look remarkably precise, especially when inconvenient variants remain politely outside the page. The stars are rarely consulted. Still, astronomical interpretation cannot be dismissed simply because enthusiastic theories overreach. Mesopotamian scholars observed the sky carefully, tracked recurring events, and connected celestial order with a royal power. The question concerns direct evidence. No surviving explanation states that the primordial reigns represent a specific planetary cycle. Similarity alone cannot establish intention. A convincing interpretation must account for the entire sequence, its variance, and its place within the composition. Scholars continue debating whether the numbers preserve one system or several traditions combined by later editors. A scribe might inherit names from one source, reigns from another, and a flood framework from ritual memory. The finished list would then resemble a woven mat. Several strands appear unified because skilled hands bind them together. You imagine different schools preserving different totals. One teacher prefers an older arrangement, while another adjusts figures to create cleaner relationships. Students copy both versions, and neither tradition disappears completely. Variation does not always signal error. Ancient texts often exist through families of copies rather than one official original. Scribes correct, expand, simplify, and occasionally misunderstand their sources. A damaged sign may become a new number when later readers reconstruct it differently. Clay can preserve mistakes with admirable loyalty. This complicates every attempt to recover a perfect formula. The mathematical design may have changed during transmission. A later editor could strengthen patterns already present, while another might disturb them unintentionally. The surviving tablets offer snapshots from a long scribal history. They do not reveal every stage through which the sequence passes. A mainstream interpretation treats the enormous reigns as markers of mythic time. They establish a world qualitatively different from ordinary history, where rulers stand closer to divine beginnings. This approach explains scale without requiring literal longevity. It also fits the shrinking reigns found when royal tradition approaches periods supported by inscriptions and archaeology. Time becomes increasingly human. The transition may suggest that sacred power weakens across generations. It may also reflect changing sources, with legendary tradition gradually yielding to remembered dynasties. These explanations are not identical. A theological reading sees decline from primordial perfection. A historical reading sees improving records. A literary reading sees the author guiding listeners from wonder toward recognizable political time. Perhaps all three remain present. You trace the columns with your eyes as rain follows rain. The early figures feel smooth and monumental, like blocks placed within an invisible temple. Their proportions create stability, although the people supposedly living through them remain almost entirely undescribed. A king governs for thousands of years, yet one harvest receives no mention. Children are born, houses collapse, and channels wander. The list remains focused upon royal duration. Human life disappears inside arithmetic. This may reveal the true subject of the numbers. They do not measure individual experience. They measure the endurance of kingship as a sacred institution. The ruler becomes a vessel holding time. His personal actions matter less than the continuity preserved through his reign. When the number ends, authority moves, and the cosmic sequence continues. Such abstraction serves later monarchies well. It presents kingship as something woven into the deepest structure of existence. Political rule appears older than ordinary memory and almost independent of human invention. Yet the same numbers contain a warning. No reign remains permanent, however vast its assigned duration. Each king eventually yields his place, and every city loses custody of authority. Mathematical grandeur cannot prevent transition. The flood stands beyond the final antediluvian total like a dark line across the tablet. All calculations approach it, though none can negotiate with it. The carefully measured world meets an event that resets measurement itself. Researchers at Yale University have examined how Mesopotamian compositions use catastrophe to divide sacred eras. Such divisions allow scribes to explain why the distant world differs so sharply from their own. The flood becomes a boundary between scales. On one side, kings govern through numbers too large for biography. On the other, reigns begin contracting toward generations that can be remembered, compared, and questioned. The change feels almost like waking. You remain in the scribal room as the lamp flame grows smaller. Clay tablets rest upon shelves, each one carrying carefully arranged wedges. Their numbers look silent, but they govern the shape of the past. Perhaps they preserve a lost calendar. Perhaps they express sacred perfection. Perhaps they reveal scribes imposing order upon traditions already ancient in their own time. No single key turns easily. The numerical system remains visible, while its final purpose stays concealed. You can measure every sign, calculate every total, and compare every surviving version. The mystery survives calculation. The second royal name enters the clay with the same unsettling calm. Alalgar rules in Eridu, and the list grants him 36,000 years. No battle explains his arrival. No funeral closes the reign of Alulim. Kingship simply passes to another shadow. You now face a pattern rather than a solitary mystery. One impossible ruler might be dismissed as an isolated invention. Two rulers, arranged within the same city and governed by a related numerical logic, and suggest deliberate construction. The scribes are not scattering wonders across the tablet, they are building a sequence. Alalgar remains even less visible than Alulim. His name appears within the ancient royal tradition, yet no secure inscription from Eridu identifies him. Archaeology has not revealed his tomb, palace, seal, or building dedication. He exists through placement. That placement matters because the second ruler confirms continuity within the first city. Kingship does not descend. Touch Eridu briefly, then disappear. It remains there across two enormous reigns, creating a primordial dynasty. The city therefore receives more than ceremonial priority. It holds authority long enough to become the first stable home of rule. Researchers connected with Oxford University have examined how Mesopotamian lists use succession to create political meaning. A sequence of rulers transforms sacred descent into an institution. The office survives one individual and passes into another pair of hands. This transfer is essential to monarchy. A single ruler may be remembered as a heroic founder. A second ruler proves that the office can continue beyond its founder. Kingship becomes larger than personality because it survives death, disappearance, or replacement. Alalgar carries that burden quietly. The list gives no explanation of how he receives authority. Perhaps he inherits it through family. Perhaps divine approval selects him. Perhaps later scribes simply place his name beside Alulim to form a balanced pair. Each possibility changes the imagined beginning of dynasty. If Alalgar is a son, hereditary rule appears at the dawn of kingship. If he is unrelated, succession may depend upon ritual choice or communal recognition. If he is entirely symbolic, the pair may represent stages within sacred time. The text refuses to identify the relationship. You hear the faint squeak of sandals across a scribal school floor. A student copies the two names carefully, leaving space for their reigns. His teacher checks the signs, ensuring that the sequence remains intact. For the student, Alalgar may not require a biography. His function is already clear. He stands second, he rules Eridu, and his reign expands the age preceding catastrophe. Position becomes identity. This method appears throughout ancient lists. A name gains meaning from what surrounds it. The ruler is defined by city, order, duration, and transition rather than personal action. Modern readers often search for character. Ancient administrative habits may prefer structure. The result can feel strangely cold. 36,000 years pass without one recorded decision. Alalgar may witness countless harvests, migrations, births, and environmental changes. Yet the composition offers no human scene. He becomes a pillar of time. The number assigned to him exceeds the reign of Alulim. This increase prevents the sequence from behaving like a simple decline. Primordial chronology does not move steadily downward from greater to lesser ages. Instead, the figures follow a designed arrangement whose exact logic remains debated. Scholars at Yale University have compared variants of antediluvian traditions across different tablets. Their studies show that scribes preserved related patterns while allowing changes in names, totals, and order. The tradition remained stable enough to recognize, yet flexible enough to evolve. Alalgar therefore belongs to a living textual inheritance. His name may have been copied from sources already old when surviving tablets were created. Each generation of scribes receives a sequence and decides how faithfully to preserve it. Some copy with great care, others adjust signs, resolve damaged passages, or harmonize conflicting traditions. A ruler can survive for centuries through this quiet labor. Even when no storyteller recalls his deeds, clay becomes ancestry. One quirky proposal connects Alalgar with an early divine or semi-divine guardian associated with Eridu's sacred depths. The idea rests largely upon later traditions and uncertain linguistic comparisons. Enthusiasts sometimes extend this into elaborate stories involving secret teachers beneath the water. The evidence, regrettably for those stories, remains very patient and very small. A more cautious interpretation sees Alalgar as a literary companion to Alulim. Together, they establish the idea that civilization begins through ordered succession rather than one miraculous reign. The pair creates rhythm. First kingship descends, then one ruler holds it, another follows, proving that the office can be transmitted. Only after this continuity is established does authority move toward another city. This structure resembles a foundation ritual. Each step prepares the next, and no element stands alone. You imagine Eridu during this legendary age, not as archaeology reconstructs it, but as tribal memory arranges it. The city rests beside shining waters, protected by divine wisdom. Its rulers govern without visible rivals, and time stretches around them like an endless plain. Alalgar walks through that imagined city without leaving footprints. He may enter Enki's sanctuary or receive symbols of office and direct offerings during seasonal ceremonies. He may settle disputes, appoint attendants, and oversee the distribution of food. None of these acts appears in the surviving list. They belong to the empty space surrounding his name. That emptiness encourages speculation, but it also defines the limits of responsible storytelling. A plausible scene is not evidence. The fact that a king could perform certain duties does not prove Alalgar performed them. The distinction remains important. Mainstream historical interpretation treats the antediluvian rulers as part of a literary construction shaped by theology, mathematics, and political memory. Their existence cannot be confirmed through contemporary records. Yet historians also recognize that lists may preserve older names without preserving accurate biographies. A name can travel farther than the person attached to it. The open scholarly debate concerns whether Alalgar reflects a forgotten local tradition, a symbolic role, or a purely scribal creation. Some researchers allow the possibility of distant oral memory, others see no reason to move beyond literature. Neither side can produce decisive evidence. A forgotten ruler could leave no surviving monument. A fictional ruler could be written with complete confidence. Material silence cannot separate those possibilities. The pair of Eridu kings complicates the issue further. Two names suggest inherited structure, but structure can belong equally to memory and invention. You notice how balanced the sequence feels. Eridu receives kingship, then holds it through 2 reigns of enormous scale. The city appears complete, orderly, and stable. This stability may reflect Enki's character. Wisdom creates arrangement. Water follows channels. Crafts follow techniques. Rituals follow correct sequences. Kingship also follows order. Passing from one ruler to another without visible chaos, Alalgar becomes part of that ordered world. His lack of personal drama may be intentional. A primordial king does not need rebellion, romance, or conquest. His importance lies in preserving continuity during an age imagined as close to divine balance. The silence around him becomes a form of perfection. Later kings attract stories because they struggle, conquer, fail, and die within recognizable history. Alalgar belongs to a world where the institution matters more than the man. Perhaps that is why his reign feels endless. 36,000 years cannot be pictured as a series of days. The mind turns the number into atmosphere. Time becomes broad, unmoving, and almost ceremonial. You stand beneath a darkening sky while water glows beside the imagined city. Somewhere within the sacred precinct, one ruler has yielded authority to another. No trumpet sounds, no inscription records the transfer, only the sequence remains. Al-Algar confirms that the first kingship was not a momentary gift. It became a system, and the system learned how to survive its first ruler. Rain begins as a soft tapping against the reed roof, almost gentle enough to ignore. Then the sound thickens, spreading across the settlement until every surface seems to tremble. Channels rise, courtyards darken, and familiar paths disappear beneath moving brown water. The flood enters Mesopotamian memory as more than a disaster. It becomes a boundary drawn across time itself. On one side stand rulers with impossible reigns and cities touched by divine beginnings. On the other side, kingship returns to a world that feels increasingly human. The ancient list marks this division with startling restraint. It does not linger over drowning houses, broken boats, or desperate families. It states that the flood swept over the land, then allows kingship to descend again. An entire age vanishes between two statements. You feel the silence surrounding that disappearance. 8 rulers, 5 cities, and more than 200,000 years suddenly lose their place within the living world. Sacred chronology does not gradually fade, it breaks. The catastrophe gives the sequence its deepest structure. Primordial kingship belongs to an order that cannot continue unchanged. Once the waters pass, authority must be established again under altered conditions. This renewed kingship does not return to Eridu. Another city receives the office, and royal time begins moving through a more crowded political landscape. Rulers become less distant, reigns contract, and recognizable conflict enters the record. The world has grown smaller. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania have examined flood deposits found at several Mesopotamian settlements. Excavations at places including Shuruppak, Kish, and revealed layers created by major local inundations. Although these layers belong to different periods, that difference matters greatly. No single excavated deposit covers every known Mesopotamian city at the same moment. The archaeological evidence points toward repeated regional floods, rather than one securely identified event overwhelming the entire inhabited world. A river can destroy everything a community knows without covering the planet. For survivors standing upon rooftops, clinging to boats, or searching for missing relatives, the distinction offers very little comfort. Their world has ended. Southern Mesopotamia is especially vulnerable because settlements rise across an extremely flat plain. Rivers carry heavy sediment, channels shift, and embankments can fail with little warning. Water spreads broadly when it escapes confinement. A flood moving across flatland does not need great depth to become devastating. It enters storage rooms, dissolves mud brick walls, ruins seed grain, and contaminates wells. Livestock scatter, fields vanish, and roads become channels. Mud brick returns quickly to mud. You stand in a house as water reaches the threshold. A family lifts baskets onto shelves while someone pulls sleeping mats from the floor. Outside, neighbours shout across the rising current. The household knows floods. Smaller ones have visited during earlier seasons. This water feels different because it continues climbing after every familiar marker disappears. The doorway becomes a river. Such experiences can survive through generations as family memory. A child who witnesses one catastrophic inundation may repeat the story throughout a long life. Descendants inherit the account, adding names, divine warnings, and moral meaning. Local disaster becomes ancestral history. When several communities preserve similar memories, scribes can weave them into a larger tradition. The flood then becomes not merely something that happened, but something explaining why the present world differs from the first one. Oxford University scholars studying Mesopotamian literature have noted that flood stories often connect destruction with human noise, divine anger, population, or disrupted order. The catastrophe responds to a problem within creation rather than arriving through meaningless weather. This gives suffering a structure. People naturally search for causes when destruction appears overwhelming. A failed embankment explains how water entered, but it does not explain why one family survives while another disappears. Religious narrative reaches into that emotional space. The gods decide. A warning is given. One human listens. Life continues through preparation, obedience, and luck transformed into sacred favour. And the story does not remove grief. It makes grief narratable. A peculiar Mesopotamian detail concerns the hero's release of birds while searching for dry land. Different literary versions describe birds returning or failing to return, allowing the survivor to judge whether the waters have receded. The method sounds poetic, yet it is also practical. A bird that finds somewhere to rest does not need to return to a crowded boat, which is sensible behaviour by almost any standard. The bird becomes a living instrument. Its flight measures a landscape hidden beyond sight. No map survives. Landmarks remain submerged, and distant ground cannot be tested from the vessel. Wings provide knowledge where human vision fails. This combination of usefulness and symbolism suits Mesopotamian storytelling. Ordinary actions carry sacred meaning because survival itself depends upon careful observation. The flood also explains the reduction of royal lifespans. Primordial rulers govern across enormous spans, while later kings become increasingly mortal. Catastrophe closes the age of abundance and opens a world limited by death, rivalry, and fragile memory. Some historians interpret this change as literary design. The authors guide listeners from mythic time toward dynasties supported by inscriptions and archaeological evidence. The shrinking rain signal movement from sacred origins into political history. Other scholars see theological decline. Humanity stands farther from divine order once the waters recede. Kingship remains sacred, but its holders no longer possess the scale associated with the First Age. The debate remains unsettled because both readings fit the structure. A text can organize historical traditions while also expressing religious ideas about loss. Perhaps the flood does both. It separates different kinds of evidence. Earlier rulers survive mainly through legend, symbolic numbers, and sacred geography. Later rulers increasingly appear within inscriptions, monuments, economic records, and conflicts remembered by neighbouring cities. The waters form a bridge disguised as destruction. They allow the composition to place myth and history within one continuous sequence. Without the flood, the transition from impossible reigns to human dynasties might feel awkward. Catastrophe explains the change in scale. Time itself has been washed clean. You hear the rain weakening towards dawn. Water still fills the streets, but the surface no longer rises. Broken reeds drift beside jars, roof fragments, and household objects released from collapsed rooms. Survivors emerge slowly. They measure loss through absence. A wall is gone, a boat has vanished, someone does not answer when called, familiar ground remains hidden beneath silence. Rebuilding begins with small decisions. A family searches for dry grain, neighbours repair a raised platform, someone marks the water level upon a surviving wall. Memory begins immediately, years later. Children ask why the old settlement lies beneath a layer of clean silt. Elders describe the night when the river covered everything. Their voices carry details that no excavation can preserve. Generations pass, and the flood grows larger within the telling. It reaches more cities, lasts longer, and divides human existence into two ages. The remembered disaster becomes a cosmic event. Researchers at Yale University have emphasized that ancient flood traditions should not be treated as straightforward newspaper reports. They combine environmental memory, theology, political ideology, and literary design. Yet calling them literature does not make them empty. Stories can preserve emotional truth even when chronology changes. A community remembers vulnerability, survival, and the terrifying instability of water. Eridu stands close to that fear. Its divine protector governs fresh water. Yet water can also erase every human arrangement. The same force supporting crops can dissolve houses and carry away the boundaries of fields. Wisdom therefore includes respect for destruction. The flood ends the first royal age, but it does not end kingship. Authority descends again because human society still requires coordination, judgment, ritual, and labour. The office survives where individual rulers cannot. That survival creates a quiet paradox. The flood destroys the world governed by primordial kings, yet it confirms kingship's permanence. Cities disappear, reigns end, and populations scatter, but the institution returns. Divine order bends without breaking. You watch the last rain fall across dark water. Somewhere beneath the surface lie courtyards, ovens, shrines, and footprints softened into nothing. The first age has closed. Its kings remain on clay, suspended beyond the floodline, where human history fades into sacred memory and the waters refuse to reveal what they carried away. Salt touches the air with a dry taste, although the sea lies far beyond the horizon. Beneath your feet, pale soil, cracks around abandoned channels and ancient ridges. The landscape seems empty, yet its surface preserves the slow movement of vanished water. Southern Mesopotamia is never truly still. Rivers wander across the plain, carrying mud from distant mountains and laying it down grain by grain. Shorelines advance, lagoons shrink, and marshes appear where open water once reflected the sky. A settlement built beside one channel may stand inland when that channel moves away. Eridu grows inside this changing geography. During its earliest occupation, the waters of the Gulf likely reach farther inland than they do today. Broad wetlands spread across the southern plain, where river water, tidal influence, and seasonal flooding create a complicated environment. The exact ancient coastline remains debated because sediment repeatedly buries the evidence. Geological research from universities including Oxford and Chicago reconstructs this landscape through soil cores, shells, microscopic organisms, and buried river channels. Each sample offers a narrow column through time, preserving traces of water chemistry, vegetation, and sediment movement. You watch a core emerge from the ground, dark with damp clay. Its layers resemble a quiet archive. Although no scribe shaped them, fine particles mark calm water, while coarser bands suggest stronger currents or sudden deposits. The earth has its own handwriting. A shell found far inland may reveal an earlier lagoon. Pollen can indicate reeds, grasses, or cultivated plants growing nearby. Salt crystals record evaporation, while buried channels expose rivers that abandoned their courses centuries ago. Such evidence changes the way Eridu appears. The city is not simply built beside water. It occupies a moving frontier where land is continually created, drowned, salted, and reshaped. This instability may explain why ancient stories imagine civilization rising from watery depths. Communities watch islands of firm ground emerge within marshes, then disappear beneath sediment or shifting channels. The boundary between land and water never feels permanent. Creation appears unfinished. A channel clogged with mud may force families to dig a new route. A lagoon can become reed-filled marshland within several generations. Fields once productive may turn pale when salt accumulates near the surface. The people do not need abstract geology to understand change. They see it in failed crops, stranded boats, and wells that taste different. Grandparents remember fishing where children now herd animals across dry ground. memory becomes a map of vanished water. One family may describe a sacred place once surrounded by reeds. Another remembers a spring covered by advancing mud. Such accounts can survive long after their physical settings disappear. Over time, ordinary environmental memory may acquire religious meaning. A lost shoreline becomes a drowned world. An abandoned settlement becomes a city claimed by divine water. A channel's disappearance becomes punishment, withdrawal, or cosmic change. It's possible that Eridu's traditions preserve such transformations in symbolic form. The evidence cannot prove a direct connection, but the landscape encourages stories about submerged beginnings. Scholars remain divided over how closely environmental events should be matched with ancient myths. Some researchers emphasize geological memory, suggesting that stories preserve echoes of real shoreline shifts and floods. Others caution that mythological water can express creation, purification, danger, or divine power without recording one specific event. Both views carry weight. A story may contain physical memory without functioning as a geological report. Human communities do not preserve environmental change through measurements alone. They preserve it through ancestors, sacred places, warnings, and repeated images. The result is neither pure history nor pure invention. You stand near an old river ridge rising only slightly above the plain. The elevation seems insignificant, perhaps no higher than a person's knee, yet during flooding, such a ridge can separate safety from ruin. Early settlements often favour these natural embankments. They provide firmer ground beside navigable water while remaining close to fields and marsh resources. Their advantages also create danger because the river may eventually break through or abandon them. A city depends upon the same channel that can betray it. River movement in southern Mesopotamia occurs through a process called avulsion. When water suddenly chooses a new course across the flat plain, sediment raises the riverbed over time until the channel becomes unstable. A breach then redirects the flow toward lower ground. The change can be rapid. Fields lose irrigation, boats lose access, and communities face difficult choices. Some dig connecting canals, others relocate toward the new channel. Temples may remain upon sacred ground even as economic life shifts elsewhere. This could help explain why certain ancient cities decline without dramatic destruction. Water simply moves away, taking transport, agriculture, and daily usefulness with it. Eridu may have experienced repeated versions of this slow abandonment. Its sacred importance survives, but changing waterways reduce its practical advantages. Pilgrims and rulers continue honouring the sanctuary even when the surrounding settlement contracts. A god can remain where a river does not. Salinity presents another quiet threat. Irrigation water evaporates beneath intense heat, leaving minerals within the soil. Without sufficient drainage, salt gradually gathers near plant roots and weakens harvests. The process lacks the spectacle of a flood. No wall collapses during one terrible night. Instead, fields produce less grain each season, and farmers watch healthy green shoots become sparse. The disaster arrives politely. Ancient cultivators respond through crop changes, drainage, fallowing, and adjustments to water management. Barley tolerates salt better than wheat, making it increasingly important in difficult soils. Administrative records from historical Mesopotamia reflect careful concern with fields, canals, and yields. Such practical knowledge belongs naturally within Enki's domain. Wisdom means understanding hidden causes beneath visible decline. A field may appear dry while its deeper problem is salt carried by water years earlier. The land remembers every irrigation. One quirky tradition claims that certain ancient settlements were swallowed by the sea or buried beneath marshes almost overnight. Modern searches occasionally treat these accounts as directions toward lost cities beneath Gulf waters. Underwater archaeology may eventually identify prehistoric camps or settlements along drowned shorelines. Sea levels rose greatly following the last ice age, covering land once available to human communities. Yet no submerged palace of Alulim has been confirmed. The image remains compelling because water hides evidence more completely than sand. A drowned site can preserve walls, tools, and organic materials while remaining inaccessible beneath sediment. The hidden city becomes scientifically possible in general. Though not proven in this particular legend, researchers continue mapping ancient channels through satellite images, soil studies, and remote sensing. Faint lines across the plain reveal rivers that no longer exist. From above, the land resembles a web of pale scars. Each scar once carried sound. Water struck boat hulls, birds nested beside reeds, and workers shouted across fields. Children learned the safest crossings, while temple attendants watched seasonal levels with concern. Now the channel contains dust. You follow one abandoned course toward the horizon. Broken pottery appears along its edge, suggesting households once stood nearby. The settlement may have depended upon water that vanished gradually, leaving residents to carry supplies from increasing distances. Their departure needs no invasion. Families pack woven mats, tools, seed grain, and sacred objects. They move toward another channel where fields can still be watered. The old houses remain behind until roofs collapse and walls soften beneath rain. Years later, travelers pass the ruins and hear that the place was taken by water. Even though dryness caused its abandonment, memory reverses the process because the lost channel still defines the story. Perhaps submerged traditions grow from such contradictions. Water creates settlements, withdraws from them, and remains responsible for their disappearance in collective imagination. Eridu stands within this restless system, sacred because its stability can never be trusted. Its deepest god governs the unseen waters supporting life, while its people live above shifting channels and buried shorelines. The city's antiquity may therefore feel older than land itself. Buildings rise where marsh becomes firm ground, and stories gather where water once moved. Night settles across the plain, and salt glimmers faintly upon the soil. No wave reaches the mound, yet the vanished shoreline seems present within the silence. Beneath the dust lie channels, shells, reeds, and memories of open water. The landscape has changed its face, but it has not forgotten its depths. A bronze lamp burns inside a royal chamber while a scribe prepares fresh clay. The king speaks slowly, choosing words meant to outlive his body. He does not begin with his victories. He begins with the gods, the ancient cities, and the order he claims to restore. Eridu stands near the center of that language. For rulers across Mesopotamia, age creates authority. A newly crowned king may control soldiers, workers, canals, and fields, yet force alone cannot make his reign feel rightful. He needs a story explaining why heaven accepts him. Eridu offers such a story. The city is remembered as the first home of kingship and the sacred dwelling of Enki. By honouring Eridu, a ruler places himself within a tradition reaching toward the beginning of civilized time. His reign becomes another link in a chain believed to descend from divine order. This is political memory at work. A king may rebuild a sanctuary, dedicate a vessel, restore a canal, or include Eridu within his royal titles. These actions show respect, but they also make a claim. The ruler presents himself as caretaker of an order older than his dynasty. Records confirm that several historical kings supported sacred buildings at Eridu. Rulers from different periods left inscriptions describing restoration, offerings, and devotion to Enki. Their attention continued even when Eridu no longer dominated regional politics. The city's weakness could strengthen its symbolic value. A powerful rival city might threaten royal authority. Eridu, by contrast, offered ancient prestige without commanding the largest armies or richest commercial network. Its holiness could be embraced without allowing a dangerous political centre to grow. The arrangement is almost convenient. A king honours the oldest city, and the oldest city politely avoids challenging his throne. Sacred antiquity becomes an ally rather than a competitor. You enter a ceremonial hall where officials stand beside painted walls. Delegates carry gifts from distant cities, each object arranged according to rank. The king receives them beneath symbols of divine favour. Among his titles, the name of Eridu appears. Most listeners may never visit its ancient sanctuary. They do not need to. The name itself carries meaning. Like a seal pressed into the imagination, Eridu suggests wisdom, origins, fresh water, and the first descent of royal authority. The ruler borrows that meaning. Political legitimacy often depends upon controlling the past as carefully as controlling land. A king who connects himself with ancient tradition appears less temporary. His dynasty may be new, but the office surrounding him seems eternal. Researchers at Yale University have examined how Mesopotamian rulers used inscriptions to present themselves as restorers, rather than inventors. Kings frequently claim to renew ancient temples, recover forgotten plans, and return neglected rituals to proper order. Innovation hides beneath restoration. A ruler may introduce new architecture, new administration, or new political arrangements while describing them as returns to sacred custom. Change becomes acceptable when dressed in the language of recovery. Eridu provides the perfect stage for that performance. Its temples are old enough to support almost any claim of ancient continuity. A king can say that he has uncovered foundations laid by distant ancestors. He can place his own deposit inside the rebuilt wall, allowing future excavators to find his name beside older remains. The structure becomes a conversation across centuries. You hear workers mixing clay in a broad courtyard. Brick moulds strike the ground with steady rhythm. Overseers count labour teams while temple officials inspect the new foundations. The king may never lift a basket himself. His inscription still announces that he built the sanctuary. Royal language compresses collective labour into one name. Thousands of workers shape bricks, transport reeds, prepare food, and repair channels. Architects calculate walls, priests define ritual requirements, and scribes record supplies. The completed building belongs publicly to the king because he commands the system making it possible. This concentration of credit strengthens monarchy. A temple becomes visible proof that the ruler can mobilize resources and please the gods. His name enters the wall, while most workers disappear from memory. Enki receives a renewed house. The king receives legitimacy. The exchange serves both temple and palace. Priests gain supplies, land, and royal protection. The ruler gains sacred approval from an institution whose antiquity exceeds his own. Scholars remain divided over how independently temple officials could negotiate with kings. Some historians describe sanctuaries as powerful land-holding institutions capable of protecting local interests. Others emphasize royal control over appointments, labor, and resources. The balance probably changes across periods. A weak king may depend heavily upon priestly support. A strong ruler may place loyal officials inside the temple administration. Sacred tradition remains stable in appearance, while authority shifts quietly behind the walls. Eridu's prestige gives its religious personnel unusual symbolic power. A blessing associated with Enki can strengthen claims to wisdom, fertility, and rightful rule. Refusing cooperation might create political discomfort, even when the city lacks military strength. Ancient sanctity is difficult to threaten openly. A conqueror can destroy walls, but attacking a revered sanctuary risks presenting himself as an enemy of divine order. Wise rulers prefer restoration, dedication, and respectful language. Even foreign dynasties adopt local traditions. A ruler born outside southern Mesopotamia may still honor Eridu once he controls the region. By doing so, he shows that conquest has not disrupted sacred order. The gods appear to accept his presence, and ancient institutions continue under his protection. The message is reassuring. Fields will be watered, offerings will arrive, temples will stand. The ruler may possess an unfamiliar accent or ancestry, but his actions fit the expected pattern. One curious royal habit involves claims of discovering foundation deposits belonging to very ancient predecessors. A king restoring a temple might report finding an old inscription buried within the structure. Sometimes such discoveries were probably genuine. Temples often contain deposits placed deliberately inside walls, yet the announcement also served political theatre, since the present king could portray himself as chosen to recover forgotten wisdom. The buried tablet conveniently approves the builder. A fringe idea suggests that priests at Eridu maintained secret archives containing records from the age preceding the flood. No excavated collection confirms such an archive, though later writers occasionally imagine temples preserving knowledge beyond ordinary human history. The image remains attractive because temples did store tablets, rituals, and learned traditions. A locked room filled with a clay record seems less impossible than a supernatural library. Still, no tablet written by Alulim has emerged. What survives instead is a pattern of rulers reaching toward him symbolically. They do not need his personal document. His position at the beginning of kingship already serves their purpose. The first king becomes a distant ancestor of every crown. A ruler may not claim direct blood descent from Alulim. The connection is institutional rather than biological. Both men occupy the same sacred office, although thousands of imagined years separate them. This continuity turns monarchy into inheritance from heaven. You stand beside a newly restored wall as a foundation tablet disappears inside a small cavity. Workers seal the bricks, hiding the royal name from living eyes. The inscription is meant for gods, future builders, and perhaps the patient earth itself. Its concealment seems strange by modern standards. A public monument displays authority openly. A buried deposit displays confidence that the building belongs within a sacred sequence. The king writes for readers who may arrive centuries later. He expects remembrance. Eridu grants that expectation unusual depth. A ruler building there places his name inside a site already layered with ancestral construction. His wall rests upon earlier walls, and his claim rests upon earlier claims. Political memory becomes stratigraphy. The city's importance therefore survives changes in population, waterways, and military power. Its value no longer depends entirely upon present strength. It functions as a sacred reference point through which rulers explain themselves. A king seeking wisdom turns toward Enki. A dynasty seeking antiquity invokes Eridu. A conqueror seeking acceptance restores what appears timeless. Perhaps this is why the city never disappears completely from royal imagination. Its physical settlement may contract, but its symbolic territory expands across Mesopotamia. Every throne needs an origin. Eridu offers one old enough to silence ordinary questions. Why should this ruler command? Because kingship itself entered the human world through the order preserved there. The answer is theology, memory, and politics woven together. Night gathers around the restored sanctuary. Fresh plaster reflects lamplight, while older foundations remain unseen below. The king's name rests within the wall, close to layers belonging to rulers no one can identify. He has joined their silence. Through Eridu, his reign now appears less temporary. Through him, Eridu receives another renewal. City and king preserve one another, each borrowing permanence from the other. A clay tablet rests beneath lamplight while a scribe traces the purpose of humanity. The words do not begin with freedom, curiosity, or individual fulfillment. They begin with work. In several Mesopotamian creation traditions, human beings appear because the gods require relief from labor. Fields must be tended, canals cleared, offerings prepared, and sacred households maintained. Humanity enters the world already surrounded by duties. The idea feels unsettling. You are not created as a wandering observer beneath the stars. You are placed inside a system of food, water, worship, and obligation. Life begins with a task already waiting. Eridu stands close to this ancient model because Enki often directs the clever solution. When divine order becomes difficult, he finds a way to organize competing needs. His wisdom does not remove labor. It assigns labor to a new participant. Humanity becomes useful. Researchers at the University of Chicago have studied Mesopotamian creation literature alongside economic records from temples and estates. Their work shows how mythic labor often reflects the practical organization of ancient society. Gods possess households, receive meals, own lands, and depend upon human service. The divine world resembles an enormous institution. Temples provide daily offerings of grain, drink, meat, oil, incense, and crafted goods. Priests supervise rituals, while farmers, fishers, brewers, herders, potters, and laborers will support the sacred economy. Every offering carries the work of many unseen people. You smell bread warming near a temple oven. Brewers stir thick liquid inside large jars, and fishermen unload baskets near the water. Scribes count deliveries while workers wait for measured rations. The city hums with obligation. A king stands within this system as its human guardian. He does not create the sacred order, at least according to royal ideology. He preserves it by ensuring that canals flow, temples receive supplies, and labor remains organized. His legitimacy depends upon balance. Too little labor leaves fields dry and sanctuaries neglected. Too much demand exhausts households and invites resistance. A capable ruler must collect resources without destroying the communities producing them. This requires more than force. Canals need seasonal cleaning because silt gathers quietly along their beds. Embankments require repair before floods arrive. Fields must receive water in an order accepted by neighbouring households. One blocked channel can create several enemies. The king may appoint officials to supervise work teams and settle disputes. Temple administrators record grain, animals, textiles, and labour leases. Local leaders negotiate which households provide workers during urgent repairs. These arrangements transform water into politics. A farmer upstream can take more than his share, leaving downstream fields dry. A neglected bank can break and flood another family's crop. Private decisions quickly become public dangers. Royal authority promises to keep the system fair, although promises and reality rarely match perfectly. A ruler may favour temples, elite households, or loyal officials. Corruption is not a modern invention. Still, the ideal remains powerful. The king appears in inscriptions as shepherd, builder, provider, and guardian of justice. He restores canals, feeds temples, protects widows, and keeps disorder beyond the walls. These claims present rulership as service rather than possession. The language is carefully chosen. A shepherd guides the flock, but he also benefits from it. A builder improves the city, yet construction displays royal power. A provider distributes food collected through the labour of others. Ancient political ideals contain gentle contradictions. Enki's mythology helps make these contradictions appear harmonious. Wisdom assigns each part a proper place. Gods receive worship, humans receive life. Workers receive rations, and kings receive authority. The system seems complete when viewed from above. From below, it may feel different. You carry a basket of mud toward a damaged embankment beneath the afternoon heat. The load presses against your shoulder, and wet clay stains your clothing. An overseer counts each trip while insects gather near the water. Sacred order feels heavy. The work may protect your own household from flooding. It may also support fields belonging to the temple estates or wealthy families. Duty and exploitation can occupy the same basket. Scholars at Yale University continue debating how ordinary Mesopotamians understood compulsory labour. Some evidence suggests communal service remained essential for survival. Other records reveal systems capable of imposing severe burdens upon dependent workers. The open question concerns consent. A canal must be cleaned, but who decides how labour is divided? A temple requires food, but how much can households surrender without hunger? A king claims to protect justice, but who judges the king? Myth does not answer these questions directly. Instead, it places labour within the structure of creation. Work becomes older than politics because humanity itself was designed for service. This belief can dignify necessary tasks, yet it can also make hierarchy seem natural. The distinction matters. A person who clears a canal may believe the work supports families, city, and gods together. That belief can create genuine purpose. It can also discourage resistance when demands become unfair. Religious meaning does not erase material pressure. One quirky tradition claims that human beings were formed from clay mixed with the substance of a slain divine figure. The mixture supposedly gives humanity both earthly fragility and a troubling spark of divine intelligence. The image is symbolic, not a biological explanation. Even so, it captures an ancient observation. Satan. Humans seem made for labour, yet they constantly question the arrangement. We obey, then complain. The clay body belongs to fields, walls, graves, and riverbanks. The divine element produces memory, planning, dreams, and dangerous opinions. Humanity serves the system while remaining capable of noticing its flaws. Enki often appears sympathetic toward human survival within these stories. He may warn, advise, or quietly bend divine decisions. His wisdom includes flexibility, suggesting that order must adapt when rigid rules become destructive. This quality makes him an unusual protector. He does not abolish hardship. He helps humanity navigate it. Water still floods, labour still weighs heavily, and death remains unavoidable. Yet knowledge offers room to move. A skilled canal worker recognizes dangerous pressure before a bank collapses. A midwife understands how to calm a frightened mother. A scribe preserves agreements so powerful households cannot rewrite every obligation. Wisdom becomes a practical defense. The king ideally gathers these forms of knowledge into public order. He listens to experts, directs resources, and prevents local disputes from damaging the whole community. His role resembles a knot holding many threads. If the knot tightens too much, the threads break. Perhaps ancient kings understood this more clearly than their boasts suggest. Rebellions, migration, crop failure, and abandoned fields could weaken any throne. A ruler who consumed the system without maintaining it would eventually inherit emptiness. Balance, therefore, becomes political survival. Water, labour, and worship form three sides of the same structure. Water sustains crops, labour directs water. Worship explains why the work matters and who stands responsible for its order. The king occupies the centre, at least in official imagination. He presents offerings to Enki, commands canal repairs, and receives reports from administrators. Each act confirms that human activity remains aligned with divine expectation, but the real system depends upon countless unnamed people. A woman grinding grain supports the temple meal. A child gathering reeds contributes to roof repairs. A fisherman checking traps feeds workers who clear the canal. Their labour holds the city together. No royal inscription can perform these tasks. No sacred title can replace them. Kingship may claim the centre, yet daily survival rises from below. You hear the city settling beneath evening light. Workers return from fields. Animals are led toward enclosures, and smoke gathers above low roofs. Temple lamps begin glowing while water moves through channels under the darkening sky. The system continues because people continue. Perhaps humanity's role was never simply obedience. It may have been participation in a fragile balance requiring skill, memory, and constant repair. Enki's model does not promise ease. It offers order without certainty, wisdom without escape, and labour touched by sacred meaning. The king may stand between gods and people, but the entire structure rests upon hands stained with clay. Morning light enters the conservation room through high windows, falling across trays of pottery, clay, shell, and bone. Each object carries a label describing its trench, depth, level, and surrounding soil. Without that information, even a remarkable artifact loses much of its historical voice. You stand before a small clay fragment bearing several faint marks. They resemble writing, though erosion has softened their edges. One sign might be a name, another could be accidental damage caused by roots, pressure, or an excavator's tool. The difference is enormous. To identify Alulim archaeologically, researchers need more than an ancient object from Eridu. They need evidence securely connected with his name, position, and period. Ideally, the evidence would come from an undisturbed context within the oldest occupation levels. A contemporary inscription would be strongest. It might identify Alulim as ruler of Eridu, record an offering, or mark construction completed under his authority. A seal impression could name him and appear beside administrative records belonging to the same layer. A foundation deposit might connect his title with a building whose date can be independently tested. None has appeared. Archaeology confirms that Eridu was exceptionally ancient. Excavated architecture, ceramics, animal remains, and settlement deposits establish long occupation across prehistoric and historical periods. Repeated sacred construction shows that one location received extraordinary attention from many generations. That conclusion stands firmly. The difficulty begins when you try attaching a legendary individual to those layers. A city can be verified without verifying every person later associated with it. A sanctuary can exist centuries before surviving texts describe its divine identity. Evidence supports places more easily than names. You examine the clay fragment beneath stronger light. A specialist studies the angle of each mark, comparing it with known signs. Another researcher checks whether writing existed during the layer from which the object supposedly came. Chronology acts as a gatekeeper. If the fragment belongs to a period before developed writing, a royal inscription becomes unlikely. If it came from disturbed soil, its position may reflect later movement rather than original placement. Burrowing animals, collapsing walls, and ancient rebuilding can shift objects between levels. Even honest excavation produces uncertainty. Researchers from Harvard University and the University of Pennsylvania have emphasized the importance of archaeological context when evaluating ancient inscriptions. The words matter, but their physical relationship with surrounding material matters equally. An object purchased without documented origin cannot answer the same questions. It may be authentic clay and genuinely ancient, yet its original location remains unknown. Without context, scholars cannot connect it confidently with a building, reign, or settlement phase. The antiquities market complicates everything. A tablet offered for sale might contain an astonishing royal name. Dealers may claim that it came from southern Iraq, though no excavation record confirms the story. Scholars must consider theft, modern forgery, mistaken attribution, and deliberate exaggeration. Exciting evidence often arrives carrying inconvenient shadows. One quirky episode from the history of ancient writing involves forged tablets created to satisfy collectors seeking rare names and dramatic stories. Some forgers use ancient clay, making laboratory testing less helpful than expected. Old material does not guarantee old writing. A modern hand can press signs into genuinely ancient clay taken from a broken object. The surface may look convincing until microscopic study reveals fresh edges, unnatural tool movement, or grammatical forms copied from modern publications. The forgery may fool wealthy collectors. It may even fool specialists temporarily. Scholarship corrects itself through comparison, criticism, and the slow accumulation of doubts. Alulim attracts precisely the kind of attention that encourages forgery. A tablet naming the first king of Eridu would carry enormous financial and cultural value. That desirability makes caution essential. You cannot accept what you most desire without testing it hardest. A secure discovery would require several forms of agreement. The writing style should fit the proposed period. The language should follow ancient grammar, the clay composition should match local sources, and the object should belong naturally within its archaeological context. Independent specialists would examine every claim. Radiocarbon dating could help with associated reeds, seeds, wood, or organic material, though it cannot directly date fired clay with simple precision. Pottery comparison may narrow the period, while soil analysis can reveal disturbance. No single method creates certainty alone. Historical identification becomes strongest when separate evidence converges. An inscription names the ruler. The building belongs to the correct period. Administrative records confirm the title, and neighbouring cities mention related events. Alulim possesses none of this network. His name survives within later literary tradition, but no independent archive currently places him within ordinary historical chronology. There is no known diplomatic letter, tax record, year name, or contemporary dedication securely attached to his reign. This absence separates him from later Mesopotamian rulers. Historical kings often leave multiple traces because government produces documents. Workers receive rations, temples record gifts, merchants note obligations, and scribes date transactions. Administration scatters names widely. A king may appear upon bricks, seals, tablets, statues, door sockets, weights, and foundation deposits. Even when his palace disappears, the administrative system surrounding him can preserve his identity. The complete absence of such material for Alulim is therefore significant. It does not mathematically prove non-existence, but it limits what responsible history can claim. Scholars disagree about how strongly silence should be interpreted. Some researchers argue that a ruler without contemporary evidence should remain entirely within mythology. Others note that the earliest leadership at Eridu may predate writing and centralized administration. Both positions begin from caution. The dispute concerns how much possibility should influence reconstruction. A prehistoric leader could exist without written records. Yet no method allows scholars to identify that unnamed leader specifically as Alulim. Possibility creates space, not identity. You walk through a museum storage room where shelves hold thousands of fragments. Most are not visually impressive. A chipped rim, a lump of sealing clay, or a broken tool may appear almost meaningless. Together, they reconstruct system. Sealings reveal containers opened and closed under supervision. Pottery distribution show movement between regions. Animal remains exposed diet, season, and environment. Wear marks on tools reveal repeated labour. These traces illuminate the society that could produce leadership, ritual authority, and communal memory. They do not reveal the legendary ruler himself. The distinction can feel disappointing. People naturally seek faces within history. A named king offers a point of connection, while anonymous systems feel distant. Yet archaeology often preserves the crowd more clearly than the individual. Eridu's ordinary inhabitants left food remains, houses, vessels, and working surfaces. Their combined presence is undeniable. Though almost none can be named, Alulim has the opposite problem. He possesses a name without a securely identified body, house, tool, or a grave. His literary identity is vivid in position but empty in material detail. The contrast is almost perfect. Fringe researchers sometimes point toward unusual objects from Eridu and declare them royal symbols. A decorated vessel becomes a crown stand, a raised platform becomes a throne, and a rare stone becomes evidence of supernatural authority. Such interpretations usually depend upon resemblance rather than context. An object can look ceremonial while serving an ordinary function. A platform can support offerings, storage, seating, or work. Shape alone cannot summon a king. You return to the clay fragment as evening light fades across the table. The marks remain ambiguous. Under another angle, the possible sign looks less like writing and more like cracking. No revelation arrives. This restraint is not failure. Archaeology protects the past by refusing to turn uncertainty into certainty. A cautious conclusion may feel less satisfying, but it remains more durable than a dramatic mistake. Eridu gives abundant proof of antiquity, sacred continuity, environmental adaptation, and organized communal life. It confirms that later Mesopotamians chose a genuinely ancient city when placing kingship at the beginning of time. That choice was not random. They looked toward the ruins already carrying unimaginable depth. They connected the oldest sacred ground they knew with the oldest ruler they could imagine. The evidence meets the tradition at that point, then stops. You stand between two truths that do not fully merge. Eridu existed, and Alulim was remembered. Archaeology supports the first directly. Clay literature preserves the second. No object securely joins them. The first king remains a name hovering above real foundations, close enough to seem possible, yet distant enough to resist identification. The evening wind moves gently across Abu Shahrain, smoothing loose sand along the excavated walls. From the highest ridge, the trenches resemble dark openings cut into a pale and ancient body. Each opening exposes a different moment, yet none reveals the face sought beneath the mound. Alulim remains suspended between two forms of survival. One form belongs to matter. Eridu's walls, pottery, ash, bones, platforms, and buried channels prove that human communities lived here across immense stretches of time. Their labour created a sacred settlement whose reputation endured long beyond its political strength. The other form belongs to memory. Clay tablets preserve a first king ruling within Enki's city during an age beyond ordinary chronology. His reign occupies sacred time, where authority descends from heaven and human government begins beneath divine supervision. Both forms are ancient. They simply refuse to meet within one object. You walk along the edge of an unexcavated slope where wind has exposed scattered pottery. Most fragments contain no writing. They belong to bowls, jars, and storage vessels used by people whose daily concerns rarely entered royal tradition. Beneath this ground may rest houses, workshops, courtyards, graves, or further sacred buildings. Remote sensing conducted by archaeological teams from major American universities can identify buried walls through differences in soil, moisture, and magnetism. Such methods allow researchers to map structures without immediately removing the earth. The mound still contains unread spaces. A rectangular anomaly beneath the surface might represent a building. A line of magnetic disturbance could mark a burned wall, kiln, or filled channel. These patterns guide excavation, but they do not identify inhabitants by name. Technology can reveal shape without biography. Perhaps a chamber remains sealed below later construction. Inside it, a foundation deposit might preserve signs naming an unknown ruler. Perhaps several tablets lie beneath collapsed roofing, hardened by fire and protected from moisture. Such discoveries have occurred elsewhere in Mesopotamia. Archives sometimes survive because destruction bakes fragile clay into durable records. Catastrophe becomes an accidental conservator, which is hardly comforting to the people who experienced it. No comparable archive has identified Alulim. The possibility remains because archaeology is incomplete. Only limited portions of any ancient city can be excavated, and every trench represents a decision concerning time, resources, preservation, and research priorities. Future teams may study areas avoided by the earlier excavators. Improved imaging could reveal buried architecture without disturbing fragile levels. Chemical analysis may identify residues inside vessels, while microscopic study can expose activities invisible to the unaided eye. None of these methods guarantees a king. They may instead reveal fishermen, potters, brewers, farmers, and temple workers whose livsdebt supported the institutions later associated with kingship. That outcome would not solve the mystery, but it would deepen the world surrounding it. History often advances sideways. A newly identified workshop may clarify how sacred vessels were produced. A channel map may explain why one neighborhood prospered while another was abandoned. A group of seal impressions could reveal officials managing goods before recognizable monarchy developed. Each discovery changes the conditions under which Alulim must be imagined. If organized administration appears earlier than expected, the idea of prehistoric rulership becomes more plausible. If evidence continues showing small household communities without concentrated authority, a legendary interpretation grows stronger. The open scholarly debate concerns whether material patterns can ever recover a figure preserved only through much later tradition. Some historians believe archaeology may eventually identify the social foundations behind the legend. Others argue that Alulim belongs to a literary world whose purpose was symbolic rather than biographical. Both positions acknowledge the same limitation. An inscription could change everything, but it would need exceptional context. The signs must be ancient, the layer undisturbed, and the title consistent with the proposed period. Independent researchers would test the clay, script, language, and excavation records. Extraordinary claims require very ordinary paperwork. A sensational object without documented origin would answer little. The first king cannot be rescued through enthusiasm alone. His evidence must survive careful doubt. You imagine a future excavation at dawn. Workers clear a narrow room beneath collapsed mud brick. A small tablet appears beside a wall, its surface protected by a broken vessel. The signs become visible under soft light. Perhaps they record grain. Perhaps they list workers repairing a canal. Perhaps they name a temple servant whose title has never appeared elsewhere. Or perhaps one sign resembles Alulim. Even then, certainty would not arrive immediately. Scholars would compare spellings, examine grammar, and ask whether the name belonged to a person, deity, title, or later intruder. Discovery begins another argument. A fringe possibility claims that Alulim's records were intentionally hidden beneath Enki's sanctuary to preserve knowledge through the flood. No excavation supports this story, though it continues appearing within modern speculation. The idea survives because concealed archives feel appropriate within a city devoted to hidden wisdom. Yet archaeological evidence does not become stronger through poetic suitability. Mystery must remain disciplined. The strongest conclusion is therefore quieter. Eridu provides the stage upon which later Mesopotamians placed the origin of kingship, its extraordinary antiquity, sacred continuity, and association with Enki made that choice meaningful. Alulim may preserve a distorted memory of early leadership. He may combine several ancestral rulers into one name. He may represent the institution of kingship itself, shaped into a person and placed at the beginning. The evidence permits these possibilities without selecting one. You turn from the trench and look across the plain. The horizon carries no ancient marshes, royal procession, or temple music. Only wind moves through the ruins, lifting dust from the rooms abandoned thousands of years ago. Yet the absence feels inhabited. Every wall belonged to people who understood their city through stories now mostly lost. They may have spoken names no scribe preserved. Their leaders may have governed through customs that left no monumental trace. Alulim could be one of those lost names. He could also be the answer later scribes created when asking who first held authority. A beginning without a ruler may have felt incomplete, so they gave kingship a guardian and placed him within the oldest city they revered. The name then outlived the explanation. Your breathing slows as darkness settles across the mound, sharp edges soften, and the trenches become shallow shadows beneath the night sky. The city seems to sink gently into the earth. Though it has been sinking for countless generations, nothing demands an answer now. You can allow the first king to remain between clay and memory. He does not need to emerge from the darkness carrying proof. His uncertainty belongs to the ancient landscape, where water once moved through reeds and lamps glowed inside low sacred rooms. Perhaps one day a tablet will rise from the soil. Perhaps a sealed chamber will preserve a name beneath collapsed walls. Perhaps new methods will reveal patterns that change the meaning of everything already known. Or perhaps the silence will continue, that silence need not feel empty. It holds the builders, fishers, attendants, children, elders, and unnamed leaders who gave Eridu its long life. Their presence survives without crowns, portraits, or impossible reigns. The first king may rest among them as an ordinary human memory enlarged by time. He may never have walked these paths at all. Both possibilities remain beneath the same quiet sky. The wind cools against your face. Sand gathers softly beside the ancient bricks, covering the smallest marks without erasing them completely. Far below, hidden water still moves through the earth. Above it rests Enki's city, layered with devotion, labour, loss, and unanswered names. You leave no final judgment behind. Eridu keeps its oldest secret beneath the mound, where archaeology waits beside legend without forcing either one to surrender. The king remains there, not proven, not entirely gone, and not yet finished, and perhaps the story is not yet complete. Good night.